What if you've been wrong about consciousness all along? What if it isn't you, not a voice, not a center, not even the fragile self you cling to? What if consciousness is less like a person and more like a place, an endless room without walls, a space where thoughts echo as visitors and memories walk in and out like strangers? Tonight, as you drift into this exploration, you will step inside that room, not as its owner, but as its witness. The present path invites you to wander through 30 corridors of paradox, each revealing consciousness, not as someone, but as somewhere. And as the hours pass, you may begin to notice how the mind's geography expands, hallways of memory, chambers of silence, windows opening to nowhere. By the end, you might not just imagine this place, you may discover you've been living inside it all along. Imagine entering a room where no one speaks. At first you think it is empty, but the longer you stand there, the more you realize it is not silence you are hearing. It is the sound of your own awareness folding in on itself. The walls do not echo because they were never built of stone or plaster, they are made of attention. Every glance you cast inside yourself seems to touch an invisible surface, a boundary that answers back without words. You are inside the silent room of consciousness, and whether you knew it or not, you have been here your entire life. The idea that consciousness is a person, a self, a speaker, a narrator, has always been convenient. You can imagine someone inside, pulling the levers, thinking the thoughts, telling the story. But what if that is not true? What if the mind is less like a puppet master, and more like a stage where the puppets perform without direction, a place where the play unfolds, but no director waits in the wings? That is the unsettling suggestion before you. Consciousness is not someone, it is somewhere. Inside this silent room, memories appear like furniture. They do not belong to you. They are just there, scattered across the floor, leaned against the walls, waiting to be noticed. Some are sharp and colorful, like a red chair illuminated by sunlight. Others are faded, threadbare, barely holding their shape. You might sit on one, you might pass another by, but none of them declare themselves as yours. They are simply in the room with you. The illusion has always been that you are the owner of this furniture, but the deeper you look, the more you notice that ownership never arrives. Memories do not have signatures, they only have presence. Thoughts, too, are visitors. They knock without warning, enter without permission, and leave without explanation. Sometimes they arrive in noisy groups, filling the silent room with chatter. Other times they trickle in, solitary, slow, pausing to linger in the corners. The silence never disappears though. Beneath all the movement, beneath all the sound, the room itself remains, the walls remain, the space remains. And you, whatever you think you are, remain only as a witness to this silent architecture. Have you ever noticed how your mind feels different in different places? A crowded cafe buzzes through your thoughts. A quiet forest slows them down. A bedroom at night makes them softer, more fluid, more dreamlike. Yet even as the world outside changes, the silent room within stays constant. Its dimensions do not shrink or expand. Its silence does not grow louder or fade away. Consciousness is steady, like a hall that does not care what enters, a place that accepts everything and holds nothing. Some traditions knew this long ago. In ancient meditation practices, monks described the mind not as a self, but as a house. Thoughts were visitors, cravings knocked at the door, anger stormed in, breaking chairs. Joy danced across the floorboards, yet the house was never destroyed. It remained, waiting, still, even if the furniture was smashed and the windows shattered. The house itself endured. That house is the silent room you now walk through, and you are not its owner, but its guest. Think about dreams. When you dream, who is in charge? Do you decide what streets appear, what voices call your name, what strange landscapes unfold? No, the dream rises by itself, yet it unfolds inside you, or more precisely, it unfolds inside the silent room. In that space, a city can grow overnight, a childhood friend can walk back into existence, a monster can chase you down corridors that never existed before, and yet when you wake, the room is still the same. Silent, waiting. There is something strange about calling consciousness a place. A place suggests a geography, a space with boundaries, something you can map. But here, the map dissolves as soon as you draw it. Try to measure the room. Where does it begin? At your senses. At the moment sound enters your ears, or the instant sight paints color across your eyes. Or does it begin earlier, in a shadowy threshold where awareness first stirs before you even notice it? And where does it end? At the limits of thought, at the edge of sleep, at the final silence of death. The more you search for the edges, the more they recede. This is no ordinary place. It is a room with no corners, a hall with no ceiling, a floor that gives way to endless depths. And yet, paradoxically, it feels enclosed. You have always felt that you live inside it, as if within four walls you can never leave. This paradox is what makes the silent room both haunting and comforting. You cannot escape it, but you cannot destroy it. You cannot point to it, but you cannot deny it. You can only walk through it endlessly, recognizing that everything you thought you owned, your thoughts, your memories, your very self, are only tenants here. None of them stay forever. None of them last. The silence deepens the more you listen. It is not empty silence. It is a fullness, a hum beneath experience. It is the silence you hear when you close your eyes, when words fail, when the story ends. It is there when you wake in the night, unable to recall your name for a moment, staring into the darkness. It is there when you are lost in music, when you forget yourself, when time slips and space bends. The silent room is always here. So, if consciousness is a place, then perhaps you are not who you thought you were. You are not the narrator, but the passerby, not the thinker, but the echo, not the owner of the room, but a fleeting guest who believes, mistakenly, that the house belongs to them. Tonight, as you drift deeper, notice the walls around you, not of plaster or stone, but of silence. Notice the floor beneath you, not of wood or tile, but of awareness itself. Notice how each thought enters and leaves, but the room remains. And remember, if there is no person here, then maybe there never was. Only the place, silent and infinite, waiting for whoever arrives. Every room has walls, but the walls of consciousness are not made of stone or wood. They are built from thoughts, layered one upon another, forming boundaries that feel solid, even though they dissolve the moment you press against them. In this way, your entire sense of reality is a kind of architecture, assembled from the bricks of thinking. Each belief, each memory, each assumption about who you are, stacks itself into place, and over time the illusion of structure hardens. You feel enclosed, you feel contained. And yet, if you lean too closely, you notice cracks where the light slips through. Consider how a single thought can rise like a wall between you and silence. Perhaps it begins as a whisper. I must remember to do this tomorrow. Instantly the room is divided. What was once open becomes segmented. Attention narrows, the boundary is drawn, and suddenly your awareness feels smaller. One thought becomes the first plank in a fence. Another thought adds to it. Soon you cannot see the horizon. You believe you are inside a room, but really, you are inside a construction of your own making. This is how identity itself is built. You tell yourself stories about who you are. I am kind. I am clever. I am anxious. I am broken. I am healing. These statements appear as beams of wood, supporting the idea of a self. Over time, the repetition of such statements becomes architecture. You lean against it, as if it were unshakable. But in truth, the walls are fragile. One shift in perspective, one dream, one crisis, and they begin to collapse. And when they do, what remains? The open space of consciousness, the silent room beneath it all. Science, too, has caught glimpses of this illusion. Neuroscientists studying perception often describe thoughts as patterns, temporary connections firing across neurons. But we mistake those patterns for permanence. Just as you mistake scaffolding for stone, you mistake passing activity for stable walls. Your brain assembles coherence like a mason stacking bricks, each one fragile, each one removable. The fact that you feel so enclosed is proof not of solidity, but of habit. A habit of believing that the walls are real. Yet, strangely, the walls comfort you. Without them, the silence might feel too wide, too overwhelming. You want boundaries. You want the reassurance that you are somewhere, that your mind has edges, that your identity has borders. Without them, who would you be? Where would you stand? The paradox of consciousness is that the walls are both false and necessary. You know they are made of thought, but you cannot help but live within them. Look at how time itself builds walls. You imagine a past. You project a future. Each is drawn as a line, as if the room of consciousness has a back wall made of memory and a front wall made of expectation. But if you lean into either wall, you discover only more thoughts, more patterns, more whispers stacking themselves. The past cannot be found anywhere but in the story told in the present. The future cannot be touched except through imagined walls of possibility. And yet both seem as solid as brick. Philosophers have wrestled with this illusion for centuries. Descartes believed thoughts were proof of a thinker, yet even he could not explain why thoughts sometimes arrive uninvited. If you were the builder of every wall, why do so many appear without your consent? Why do intrusive thoughts emerge like graffiti sprayed across your room, covering the structures you believed you owned? The more you try to take control, the more you notice you were never the architect. You are only a passerby in a house that builds itself. Walk slowly through your own thoughts for a moment. Notice how one idea leads to another, a corridor forming, a hallway stretching into the distance. You did not design this layout. It grows beneath your feet, twisting and turning in ways that surprise you. Some hallways lead to doors, others end in blank walls. Still others loop back upon themselves, repeating the same patterns endlessly. This is the architecture of thought, and it feels like your world. Yet beneath it, always, is the silence, the open space untouched by construction. There are times when the walls collapse without warning. Meditation can dissolve them, as can deep exhaustion or wonder. Sometimes grief smashes them to rubble, and you are left sitting in the ruins, uncertain who you are. Sometimes joy tears down the partitions, and suddenly you feel connected to everything. In those moments, the illusion of containment fades, and you glimpse consciousness as it truly is. Not a house with walls, but a space without borders. It is not built from thought, but only veiled by it. And still, the walls return, like restless builders. Thoughts never stop stacking themselves. They crave order, crave boundaries, crave architecture. You cannot stop them. You cannot silence them forever, but you can notice the construction. You can walk through it with open eyes, seeing each wall for what it is, temporary, fragile, transparent. When you realize this, you stop mistaking the walls for truth. You begin to see the house as a theater set, propped up for the sake of the play, ready to be taken down when the scene ends. So tonight, as you lie in your own silent room, notice the walls around you. Notice how they feel solid, built of memories, expectations, identities, beliefs. Notice how quickly they appear, how quickly they vanish, and ask yourself, if the walls are nothing but thought, what remains when thought dissolves? Perhaps then you will realize the room is wider than you imagined. Perhaps then you will glimpse that you were never inside the walls at all. You were always the space beyond them. Every room has doors, but in the silent house of consciousness, the doors do not open into hallways or streets. They open into memory. You never know what waits behind each one. Sometimes it is a childhood morning, sunlight falling across a table where your younger self once sat. Sometimes it is a half-forgotten dream, the shape of a stranger's face that should have vanished but still lingers. Sometimes it is nothing at all, just the hollow silence of a door that swings open into emptiness. Yet all of them, whether full or void, are entrances into the strange geography of your mind. What makes memory peculiar is its refusal to obey time. Open one door, and you are 10 years old again, running down a school hallway. Open another, and you are 30, staring at a clock in an office. Open yet another, and you are both at once, the hallway and the office flickering together, folding into each other, as if the walls cannot decide which reality they belong to. In the house of consciousness, memory is not a sequence. It is a set of rooms, all equally present, all waiting behind their doors. Think of how effortlessly they open. A song drifts into your ears, and suddenly a door swings wide. You smell bread baking, and another door creaks open. You hear your own name whispered, and yet another opens without your permission. You never build these doors, never oil their hinges, yet they stand there, endless, waiting to open with the slightest touch. This is the unsettling truth. You do not control your memories. They control you. They decide when to open. They decide when to stay shut. And you, what are you but a guest wandering through their halls? And notice how deceptive they are. A memory feels solid, like a room you can enter and recognize. But have you ever walked back through a memory only to find the furniture rearranged? A detail shifts the shirt someone wore, the words they said, the way the light fell. Scientists tell us, memory is reconstructive, not archival. You do not store exact records, you rebuild them each time you recall them, as if the room must be freshly constructed whenever you open its door. Each visit rewrites the past. Each opening changes the furniture. Yet still, you trust the room. Still you insist that it is real. There is a paradox in how doors open into memory. If consciousness is a place, then memory is not just furniture inside it. It is an entire series of rooms branching outward, multiplying endlessly. But if that is so, Who holds the key? You assume it is you. You assume you can reach for a memory, summon it like opening a familiar door. And sometimes, yes, the handle turns easily. But other times, no matter how you pull, the door remains locked. You cannot remember the name, the face, the street. You rattle the handle until frustration rises, but the lock does not yield. Then, days later, when you have stopped trying, the door suddenly swings open by itself, and the memory walks out, smug and unbothered. Who, then, is the keeper of these doors? Dreams complicate the picture even further. In dreams, doors open into memories that never happened. You walk into a room that feels like your grandmother's kitchen, yet she never lived in such a place. You shake hands with a childhood friend who speaks in a voice you never heard. You open a door into a memory of something that could not exist, yet in the dream it feels just as real as the classroom or the office or the table you know. In this way, dreams remind you that memory is not truth but architecture, not record but invention. The doors are less like gateways to the past and more like portals to stories. Some traditions have called this illusion Maya, the play of memory, the way doors open into rooms that distract you from the silent space beneath. If you believe the rooms are all that exist, you forget the openness that holds them. If you mistake memory for truth, you lose sight of the silence that waits when the doors close. The paradox is that you cannot live without these rooms, yet you cannot find yourself within them either. You wander endlessly, opening one door after another, and still you do not reach the heart of the house. Have you ever noticed how some doors refuse to close? A painful memory barges in, and will not leave. No matter how you try to shut it, the door remains ajar, spilling its noise into the silent room. Trauma often works this way. The hinges break, the lock rusts, and the door becomes a permanent passageway you cannot ignore. Yet, strangely, even those memories are not permanent. With time, or with the strange alchemy of healing, the door finally creaks shut. Sometimes it even vanishes, leaving behind only a wall where once there was an opening. And when that happens, you realize that memory is less like a solid house and more like shifting architecture, building and demolishing itself in endless cycles. And then there are the doors you never dare open. Everyone has them. The forbidden rooms, the memories you sense but avoid. Perhaps they contain shame or guilt or fear. Perhaps they contain nothing at all, only your projection of what might lie within. Still they haunt you. They remind you that in this house of consciousness, you are not the master. You are the wanderer. You are the one who sees the door, hesitates and walks away, never quite free of the awareness that something waits behind it. Tonight, as you lie within your own silent room, notice how easily the doors swing. Notice how a smell, a sound, a word can open an entire hallway of the past. Notice how some doors bring joy, others sorrow, others only confusion. And remember, none of them lead to a permanent place. None of them open into truth. They open only into themselves. Fragile rooms built from fragile reconstructions. Consciousness is not the doors. Consciousness is not the rooms. Consciousness is the space in which they appear. So let them open. Let them close. Walk through them if you must. Avoid them if you cannot. But do not mistake them for who you are. You are not the door, nor the room, nor even the memory within it. You are the silent space that watches, the house itself, infinite, waiting, without beginning or end. If consciousness is a house, then dreams are its corridors, endless, shifting, unpredictable. Unlike the doors of memory, which sometimes reveal familiar rooms, the corridors of dream never promise stability. They stretch out in directions that cannot exist, turning corners into impossibilities, folding space like paper, bending logic until it collapses into itself. To walk through them is to realize that the mind does not need consistency to feel real. It only needs continuity. And in dreams, continuity is both the architect and the trickster. Consider how effortlessly you traverse these corridors each night. One moment, you are in your childhood home. You turn a corner, and suddenly you are on a crowded train. Another turn, and you are standing on a cliff, overlooking an ocean that never existed on any map. The mind accepts each transition without protest. No one in the dream questions how the hallway shifted, how the geography bent, how the impossible became ordinary. This is the power of the corridor. It makes the absurd believable simply by stringing one moment to the next. Neuroscience has studied this strange phenomenon, calling it dream logic. Electrical storms ripple through the sleeping brain, stitching fragments together into scenes. The hippocampus fires memories, The amygdala floods emotions, the visual cortex paints landscapes, and the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational oversight, falls silent. Without the architect of reason to supervise, the corridors build themselves, winding endlessly, shaped only by association and effect. In this way, dreams are a raw glimpse into consciousness constructing itself without the censorship of logic. They show you how easily the mind transforms fragments into worlds. But notice how the corridors feel both vast and intimate. You walk through them as if they have always been waiting. Some are filled with light, gleaming hallways, where colors pulse with impossible intensity. Others are shadowed, heavy with dread, every step echoing like a warning. Yet whether beautiful or terrifying, they share one quality: they insist that they are real while you are inside them. You never doubt the floor beneath your feet. You never question the walls that bend impossibly around you. This insistence is what makes the corridors so disorienting when you wake. They dissolve instantly, and yet, in dissolving, they reveal how fragile your waking world might be as well. Philosophers from antiquity to modernity have wrestled with this insight. Zhuangzi, the ancient Chinese sage, once dreamed he was a butterfly. Upon waking, he wondered, was he, Zhuangzi, dreaming of being a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming of being Zhuangzi? His paradox remains alive in every dream corridor you have ever walked. Which is the real hallway? The one you walk in daylight, or the one you traverse in sleep? Both feel convincing, both feel continuous. And yet, only one dissolves upon waking. Or does it? Perhaps both dissolve, one into morning, the other into night, neither more permanent than the other. There is also the peculiar fact that dreams sometimes anticipate. People report dreaming of events before they occur, faces they have not yet met, places they have not yet visited. While science dismisses these as coincidence, the corridors of consciousness suggest another possibility. Perhaps time itself is less linear than you believe. Perhaps these hallways connect rooms not in a line but in a web, where past, present and future coexist, waiting to be discovered. If consciousness is a place, perhaps dreams are its transport system, its subways, its tunnels, connecting you to rooms you do not yet realize you have built. And then there are nightmares. These are the corridors that trap you. Endless loops where doors never open. Staircases descend forever, and you cannot wake no matter how you struggle. They reveal something chilling. The corridors are not always your ally. Sometimes they confine rather than expand. Sometimes they expose your fears in exaggerated form, forcing you to confront shadows you avoid while awake. And yet, even here the structure remains the same. It is still consciousness weaving its hallways. It is still you wandering the place, though you do not own it. Have you noticed how often dreams carry you into versions of yourself? You walk into a corridor and discover a younger self waiting, or you encounter yourself from another life, another role, another body. It is as if the house of consciousness contains endless variations of who you might have been, and dreams are the corridors that connect you to them. These selves are not you, but they live in the same place. They wander the same halls. They breathe the same silence. In this way, consciousness shows you that identity is not fixed but multiple, scattered across infinite hallways of possibility. And what of lucid dreams? The rare moments when you realize you are dreaming. In those corridors, you become briefly aware of the architecture itself. You can turn corners at will, open doors deliberately, even reshape the walls. But notice what happens. Even when you are lucid, the corridor does not vanish. It remains stubbornly there, unfolding ahead of you. Lucidity does not destroy the dream. It only reveals that the dream was always the house itself, waiting to be noticed. You never leave the corridors. You only change the way you walk them. If waking life feels different, ask yourself why. When you walk through your day, do you not also move through corridors? You step from room to room, conversation to conversation, thought to thought. You accept transitions without protest. The workplace into the street into the bedroom into the kitchen. You do not ask why, one follows the other, why continuity stitches them together. You only walk. In this way, waking life and dreaming life are not opposites but reflections. Both are corridors of endless construction. Both convince you of their solidity while you inhabit them. Both dissolve when attention shifts. Tonight, as you drift further into this exploration, imagine the corridors you will walk. Some will be narrow, some vast, some will frighten, some delight, but all of them are built from the same material, consciousness itself. They are the passageways of a place that is not a person, a geography that is not owned, a labyrinth without end. And if you find yourself lost in them, unable to distinguish dream from waking, perhaps that is the truest revelation of all. You were never outside the corridors. You were always walking them, whether your eyes were open or closed. Step inside the hall of consciousness and listen. At first, it seems barren, empty, nothing but a hollow chamber. But as your attention lingers, you begin to hear it. The echoes, they bounce against the unseen walls, rising and fading, repeating words that were never spoken aloud. These echoes are not voices from outside. They are not the whispers of ghosts. They are the reverberations of your own awareness, multiplied until they sound foreign. They remind you that consciousness is not silent. Even when no thought seems present, it hums, it reverberates, it resounds. Imagine standing in a vast cathedral with no roof. You clap your hands, and the sound lingers, doubling back, layering over itself. So too do your thoughts. One emerges, vanishes, and yet its imprint carries forward, rebounding across the hall. That is why memories resurface uninvited. That is why feelings return long after they should have ended. The hall holds their aftershocks. Every thought, every sensation, every perception leaves its trace in the architecture of consciousness. The hall does not forget, it amplifies. And yet, these echoes are deceptive. Sometimes they sound so convincing that you mistake them for new voices. You think, I've had a new idea, but in truth, it is only yesterday's whisper returning, slightly distorted. You believe, I've just felt something new, but it is only the echo of an old emotion circling back. The empty hall does not produce anything. It only repeats what has already passed. Consciousness is not a creator. It is a chamber that resounds with what enters it. This explains why you sometimes cannot tell whether you are thinking or remembering. You may be walking in silence when suddenly a phrase pops into your mind. You ask yourself, did I think this now, or did I recall it from before? The distinction dissolves. In the echo chamber, there is no clear origin. There is only repetition, and repetition blurs the line between the new and the old. Consciousness becomes a hall, where originality itself is an illusion. Science points to this phenomenon as well. Neuroscientists studying the brain's networks have found that neural activity loops, replays, reverberates. Circuits repeat patterns long after the stimulus ends. What you experience as thinking is often this looping, the echo of activity reverberating across networks that refuse to fall silent. Your brain is less like a generator and more like a hall of resonance, ringing with traces of its own activity. This is why silence in the mind feels impossible. Even when you believe you are empty, the echoes are still bouncing. And what about your identity? Isn't it also just an echo? You repeat stories about yourself. So often they harden into walls. I am this. I am that. The hall reverberates with those declarations, until you no longer distinguish between the first utterance and its countless repetitions. You begin to believe that the echo itself is you. Yet notice, the hall remains the same, whether the echoes fill it or not. The architecture does not depend on the sound. The place exists even without the reverberation. You are not the echo. You are the hall. Sometimes, though, the echoes turn against you. They grow louder, harsher, filling the space until you cannot hear anything else. Anxiety works like this, a single thought echoing so insistently that it feels inescapable. Regret echoes too, replaying mistakes until they drown out the silence. Even joy can echo, turning sweet moments into obsessive cravings. The hall has no filter. It amplifies all equally, and you, standing within it, mistake the volume for importance. Yet the echo is not the voice. It is only the residue. Have you noticed how the echoes grow stronger when you are alone? Solitude strips away distraction, leaving you face to face with the reverberations of your own awareness. This is why silence can feel unbearable to some. The hall becomes too loud when nothing else occupies it. You hear yourself too clearly. But it is also why solitude can be liberating. If you listen long enough, the echoes begin to fade. Beneath them, the pure silence of the hall emerges, steady, unbroken. Now let me turn to you, listening in this moment. What time is it where you are? And what place do you find yourself in right now? Your room, your bed, a quiet corner of the world. These questions are not interruptions. They are echoes too, reminders that your own hall of awareness is never isolated. It always exists somewhere, tied to time and place, resonating with the life around it. The sound of your clock, the hum of your street, even the quiet breath in your chest, all of them ripple through the empty hall, joining the chorus of echoes. Think also of history. Entire civilizations echo within us. Languages carry the reverberations of centuries of use. Stories echo across generations, repeated until they shape entire cultures. When you speak, you do not produce fresh sounds alone. You echo the voices of parents, teachers, ancestors. Consciousness, then, is not just your hall, it is humanity's hall, filled with echoes that stretch far beyond your lifetime. The words you think are your own were spoken before you, and will be spoken after. The hall is vast, and its echoes eternal. But notice this too, echoes fade. No matter how loud they seem, they eventually dissolve into silence. You cannot hold them, you cannot make them permanent. Even the most painful or joyful reverberation eventually quiets. What remains is the hall itself, unchanged, waiting. This is the paradox of consciousness. It is both filled with echoes and untouched by them. It holds everything, and yet remains empty. It resounds with life, and yet is forever silent. So tonight, as you rest in your own hall of awareness, notice the echoes without clinging to them. Let them arrive, let them rebound, let them fade. Do not confuse their loudness for their truth. Do not mistake their repetition for permanence. They are only sounds in a chamber, never the chamber itself. Consciousness is not the echo, it is the hall. It is the empty, boundless space where everything reverberates, only to dissolve into silence once again. Every house has windows, but the windows of consciousness are peculiar. They do not open to streets or gardens. They do not frame landscapes or let in sunlight. They are windows that look nowhere. You lean close, expecting a view, but instead you encounter a void. It is not frightening at first, only strange. A window without scenery, without horizon, without reference. And yet, when you gaze long enough, you begin to sense that these windows are essential. They are the openings through which nothingness itself becomes visible. What is it you expect when you peer out a window? Perspective, depth, something beyond yourself. And this is exactly why consciousness builds its strange windows. They promise you an outside, a beyond, a reality that seems separate from your awareness. But what happens when you press your face against the glass and find no world there? The realization stirs unease. Perhaps there is no outside after all. Perhaps everything you thought you were looking at has always been inside, projected against the pane. Think of perception itself. You assume your senses are windows to reality, that your eyes show you the world, your ears let in sound, your skin reveals texture. But modern neuroscience complicates this. What you see is not the world itself, but a reconstruction, an internal rendering based on fragments of sensory input. In this sense, your eyes are windows that do not open outward. They open inward, framing interpretations. Your brain has already built. You are not looking out at the world. You are looking in at a model. Consciousness convinces you that you are gazing beyond, but in truth, the window looks nowhere. This is why illusions fool you so easily. A magician waves his hand, and your eyes insist you saw something vanish. A painting creates depth on a flat surface, and your brain swears it perceives distance. Even dreams use these windows, conjuring landscapes that never existed, convincing you that the hallway stretches endlessly, that the mountain is real, that the stranger's face belongs to someone you have known. The windows never tell you they are opaque. They allow you to believe in an outside, even when no outside exists. Philosophers have long wrestled with this riddle. Immanuel Kant argued that we never know the thing in itself. We only know appearances, filtered through the structures of our mind. The windows of perception are not transparent panes but colored glass, shaping everything we think we see. William James, too, suggested that consciousness is less a thing and more a stream, flowing through impressions that never reveal their source. And Buddhist traditions go further, teaching that clinging to the view from the window, believing it reveals a stable world, is the root of suffering. The truth lies not in what you see, but in noticing that the window looks nowhere at all. And yet, paradoxically, the windows matter. Without them, you would be trapped in a room with no sense of space. You need the illusion of beyond. Even if the beyond is constructed, it gives you orientation. It tells you, I am here, and something else is there. Without the window, without the framing of perception, the silent room would be overwhelming, featureless, endless. The window provides shape, a focus, even if what it reveals is only your own projection. Consciousness seems to say, here is a world, look out. And you obey, forgetting that the glass reflects more than it reveals. Have you noticed how sometimes the windows fog, fatigue, illness, or altered states cloud perception. You see the world through haze. Time slows, edges blur, colors fade. It feels as though someone has drawn curtains across the windows of your mind. Other times the glass sharpens. After meditation, or moments of clarity, or even deep grief, the world seems unnaturally vivid. Every detail shimmers, every sound echoes. The window seems clean, polished, open. But whether fogged or clear, the fact remains the view is always constructed. The beyond you see is always within. Dreams expose this most clearly. In them, you gaze out countless windows into skies that never existed, into faces that dissolve, into landscapes that obey no geography. And yet you accept them as real while you sleep. You do not question why the window frames impossibilities. Only upon waking do you laugh and dismiss them. But should you? Was your waking life any less constructed? Was your belief in its solidity any less an illusion? Perhaps every window, whether dream or waking, looks nowhere. There is a peculiar comfort in this. If the windows are empty, then you are free from the burden of certainty. You do not need to insist that what you see is truth. You can treat it as scenery, useful, compelling, even beautiful, but never ultimate. The window is there to guide you, not to prove reality. Consciousness offers you views not to tell you what is, but to remind you how easily you believe what seems to be. Notice too, how the windows shift with mood. When you are anxious, the world outside seems threatening. When you are joyful, the same world seems bright. But the world did not change. The window did. Your consciousness tinted the glass, and everything you looked at took on its color. This reveals the secret. You never see reality unfiltered. You only ever see through windows looking nowhere, framing a projection that begins and ends in the silent room of awareness. Tonight, as you drift deeper into this exploration, imagine yourself at such a window. You lean forward, expecting to see streets, stars, landscapes. Instead, you see nothing. Not darkness, not light, only the absence of both. It unnerves you at first, this blankness, but then you realize, this nowhere is not empty. It is possibility itself. From it, anything can appear. From it, your memories emerge, your dreams unfold, your thoughts arrive. The window does not look onto a world already built. It looks onto a canvas waiting to be painted by consciousness itself. So the next time you gaze outward, through your eyes, through your senses, through your own fragile perception, remember that you may not be looking out at all. You may be looking inward, staring into a void that creates the illusion of beyond. And if that is so, then perhaps you have never truly left the room of awareness. Perhaps you have only ever looked into its windows, believing you were escaping, when all along you were still inside, gazing into nowhere. Imagine sunlight streaming into a room, striking the floor and casting shadows that shift as the day passes. In the silent place of consciousness, shadows also fall across the inner floor. But unlike ordinary shadows, they are not cast by external objects. They arise from thoughts, emotions, and half-formed perceptions, fleeting figures that move across awareness without substance. They suggest depth, form, meaning, yet vanish when you lean closer. These shadows are the moods and impressions that color your inner life. They are not permanent, yet they define how you move through the space of mind. Consider how a single thought can cast a long shadow. A memory of embarrassment flickers, and suddenly the whole floor is darkened. You feel its weight as though something heavy were standing there blocking the light. But if you pause and examine it, you realize nothing solid is present, only the projection of an old moment replaying itself. The shadow convinces you it has mass, but it has none. This is the peculiar trick of consciousness, to make insubstantial images feel heavy enough to bend the entire atmosphere. Have you noticed how some shadows stretch far beyond their source? A small doubt can stretch into an entire day's worth of unease. A passing word from a stranger can lengthen into hours of self-questioning. The object may be tiny, almost nothing at all, but its shadow expands to fill the floor of awareness. And because you cannot see the source clearly, you mistake the shadow for the thing itself. You believe you are anxious about the whole world, when in truth it was only one fleeting flicker that grew far larger than its cause. Science observes a similar phenomenon in what psychologists call affective coloring. Your mood casts a shadow across every perception. If you are worried, even neutral events feel threatening. If you are joyful, even difficulties feel manageable. The inner floor of consciousness is tinted not by what happens, but by the shadows emotions project. The mind insists that the world has changed, when in truth it is only the light inside that has shifted, only the shadow that has stretched. And yet, shadows are not always negative. Sometimes they bring depth, texture, contrast. Without them, the floor would be flat, unbearably bright, featureless. Shadows remind you of form. They give shape to the intangible. A fleeting joy casts a golden hue across everything. A thoughtful mood stretches into soft, cool darkness that allows reflection. Even sorrow, though heavy, adds a kind of gravitas, a solemn weight that makes the silence more profound. The shadows are illusions, yes, but they are also part of what makes the Hall of Awareness feel alive. Philosophers have long warned against mistaking shadows for truth. Plato spoke of prisoners in a cave, mistaking shadows on the wall for reality itself. In his allegory, the light outside the cave was truth, and the shadows were only poor imitations. But perhaps consciousness complicates this. In the inner hall there may be no outside at all. The shadows are not deceptions hiding a truer world. They are the natural play of awareness itself. They are how the mind creates texture in a space that might otherwise seem unbearable in its blankness. Still, shadows can trick you. Think of how often you fight them, as if they were enemies. You feel anxiety and try to banish it. You feel sadness and attempt to erase it. But the more you chase the shadow, the more it stretches. Light shifts, angles change, and suddenly the shadow looms larger. What if the trick is not to chase them at all? What if the trick is to notice them? Let them fall, let them move, let them vanish on their own. After all, shadows cannot be destroyed. They can only be seen for what they are. Temporary play between light and space. Dreams reveal this vividly. In dreams, shadows often take the form of figures, strangers with obscured faces, monsters lurking just out of view, doubles of yourself standing in dim corridors. They terrify precisely because they are undefined. You cannot see what they are, only their outline. Yet the moment you confront them, they often dissolve. The dream shows you the truth. Shadows are frightening only when you avoid them. When you face them, they vanish into the floor. And what about identity itself? Isn't the self often just a shadow? A shape you believe has substance, following you across the hall, mimicking your movements, convincing you that it is solid. But when you turn to grasp it, you find nothing. It is not an object. It is the projection of something else. The play of memory, language, expectation. You are not the shadow, nor the source. You are the floor upon which both appear. There is also beauty in how shadows shift with time. As the sun of awareness moves through waking, through dreaming, through sleep, the shadows change shape. Some vanish at night, only to return at dawn. Others stretch long across years, shaping entire lifetimes. Yet no shadow is permanent. Each one fades, replaced by another. And so you learn nothing you feel lasts forever. Nothing you believe defines you eternally. Shadows only pass across the floor remains. Tonight, as you lie within your silent room, notice the shadows on your own inner floor. Notice how they change with your mood, with your thoughts, with your memories. Notice how some stretch long, others flicker and vanish. And most of all, notice how none of them touch the floor itself. The space beneath them is untouched, steady, unbroken. Consciousness is not the shadows. Consciousness is the floor upon which shadows play. So do not fear them. Do not cling to them. Let them stretch and fade, grow and vanish. They are only signs that light still moves across your awareness, that life still stirs in the silent hall. And when they pass, as all shadows do, you will still be here, the steady floor of consciousness, waiting, unchanged, eternal. Consciousness is not a straight hallway. It is not a single room, nor even a series of predictable doors. It is a labyrinth, endlessly folding into itself. A maze where each turn leads not to an exit but to another passage, another corridor, another unexpected chamber. And unlike ordinary labyrinths, this one has no map. You can never stand above it and see its structure. You can only wander inside, step by step, never sure if you are moving forward, backward, or simply circling the same ground in disguise. Think of how thoughts move. One begins simply, I am hungry. From it branches another. What should I eat? That splits further. Maybe I shouldn't eat yet. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should choose something healthier. Each branch multiplies, turning a simple desire into a maze of options, and soon you are not in a straight path of decision-making. You are lost in a labyrinth of awareness, chasing one corridor after another. The mind convinces you that you are progressing, but in truth, you are only circling. This is why rumination feels endless. You replay conversations, regrets, choices. Each replay leads to another possible turn. What if I had said this? What if I had done that? You spiral inward, deeper into corridors, with no clear end. Rumination does not solve, it only wanders. And the more you try to find the exit, the more you realize there is none. The labyrinth was never built for escape, it was built for wandering. Neuroscience glimpses this structure in what are called recursive networks, loops of activity in the brain that feed back into themselves. Activity circles endlessly, replaying, revising, amplifying. These loops do not create clarity, they create depth, layers upon layers of awareness, reflecting upon awareness. Your very ability to think about your own thinking, metacognition, is itself a corridor in the labyrinth. You think, then you think about thinking, then you think about thinking, and so on, endlessly. Consciousness folds back upon itself, building a maze where each passage leads only to another reflection. And yet, the labyrinth is not a flaw, it is the essence of consciousness itself. Without it, you could not imagine, could not dream, could not create. The labyrinth is why a story pulls you in, why a memory grows richer with retelling, why philosophy loops upon paradox. Each twist, each turn, deepens the space, makes it more intricate. Without the maze, the room of consciousness would be flat, unbearably simple. The labyrinth gives it texture, a geography worthy of wandering, even if it offers no final exit. But notice how the labyrinth tricks you into believing in destinations. You tell yourself, if I just think hard enough, I'll reach clarity. If I just trace every path, I'll find the truth. Yet when you arrive at what feels like an answer, another corridor appears, branching off into doubt, into further questioning. Even certainty becomes a hallway. You cannot escape. The labyrinth expands with every step. To live inside consciousness is to live inside a place where every conclusion is also an opening. This is why philosophers throughout history have looped endlessly, from Descartes to Nietzsche, from Nagarjuna to Sartre. Each traced paths through the labyrinth, each convinced they had reached something solid, only to discover another turn. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," a declaration of certainty. But then, what is the I? What is thought itself? More corridors opened. The labyrinth swallowed even the simplest answers. To think deeply is to realize that consciousness never reveals its center, it only reveals its corridors. Dreams expose this more vividly than waking life. In a dream you often wander a maze of rooms, hallways, staircases. You search for exits but find only more passages. Sometimes you end up back where you started, confused. Other times you walk endlessly, convinced the destination is just around the next corner. But the destination never comes. The dream labyrinth is consciousness showing its own shape, recursive, endless, self-generating. And when you wake, you realize that waking thought is not so different. And what about identity? Isn't your sense of self just another labyrinthine corridor? You turn inward to find yourself, only to encounter thoughts about who you are. You follow those thoughts and they branch into memories, desires, fears. You chase them, convinced the real you waits at the center. But the deeper you go, the more the self dissolves into more reflections, more echoes, more endless hallways. There is no center, there is only the wandering. Consciousness as a person is an illusion. Consciousness as a labyrinth is the truth. And yet, strangely, there is peace in this. If there is no exit, then there is no need to escape. If there is no center, then there is no need to find it. You are free to wander, to explore the corridors, without urgency. Each twist becomes part of the journey. Each turn is not failure, but continuation. The labyrinth is not a trap, but a place of infinite exploration. It does not hold you prisoner. It invites you to walk forever. But remember this too. The labyrinth is made of awareness itself. The walls are not barriers but thoughts. The corridors are not obstacles but reflections. If you stop moving, if you rest for a moment, you may see the illusion clearly. You may realize that the labyrinth has no substance. It is only the play of awareness folding upon itself. And in that stillness, the corridors fade. The walls dissolve. You glimpse the open room beyond the maze, silent, boundless, free. Tonight, as you drift into the hallways of your own mind, notice how easily they multiply. A single thought becomes a dozen, each leading you deeper. Notice how each turn convinces you it is necessary, even though no exit waits ahead. Notice how the labyrinth builds itself from your own awareness, endlessly generating paths to wander. And then, let yourself wander. Do not fight the maze. Do not demand a center. Walk it as you would a dream, knowing that the point is not arrival but exploration. For in the labyrinth of consciousness, there is no final room. There is only the infinite path, folding forever upon itself. Everywhere you wander in the house of consciousness, you find rooms. They appear furnished, inhabited, alive with memories, ideas, and impressions. Yet the longer you linger, the more you realize something unsettling. None of these rooms belong to you. They have no owner. They are not claimed, not signed, not labeled. They exist in the space of awareness, as if waiting for someone to occupy them, and yet no one ever does. Think of the last time a thought appeared. Did you summon it deliberately, or did it arrive uninvited, settling into the room of your mind like a guest slipping in through an unlocked door? You may believe you are the thinker, the master, the one who generates ideas. But look closer. Thoughts come and go without your permission. They decorate the rooms, rearrange the furniture, paint the walls with moods, but they never ask, if this is your house, why don't you control who enters? Memories work the same way. One moment you are in the present, and then suddenly a memory appears, vivid as though it just happened. You did not call for it. It arrived, took its seat in the room, and began to replay itself. And when it leaves, you cannot stop it. The room empties without explanation. Who, then, is the host? Where is the owner who should decide which memories stay and which go? You look for them, but find only more rooms, each as ownerless as the last. This is why so many traditions describe the self as an illusion. Buddhism teaches anatta, the absence of a permanent self. Neuroscience, too, describes the self as a construct, an emergent story woven from countless fragments of perception and memory. In both cases, the conclusion is the same. The rooms of consciousness do not belong to anyone. They arrange themselves, dissolve, rebuild, but no master ever claims them. The illusion of ownership is only another piece of furniture, another decoration in an empty room. And yet, you live as if you were the owner. You say, my thoughts, my feelings, my memories. But consider how fragile that my truly is. When a mood overtakes you, do you control it? When anxiety storms in, can you forbid its entry? When joy arrives, do you decide how long it stays? The rooms change themselves. The furniture rearranges itself. The walls repaint themselves. You are not the architect. You are the passerby who insists the house is yours while knowing, deep down, that you have no key. Dreams make this even clearer. When you dream, entire rooms arise, filled with objects, voices, landscapes. They feel familiar, as though they belong to you. Yet upon waking, you realize none of it was ever yours. The dream built them, and the dream erased them. They were never owned, never permanent. And so too with waking consciousness. The difference is only duration. The dream vanishes quickly. The waking room lingers longer, but both are ownerless, both fleeting, both unclaimed. Think of how strange it is that identity itself shifts. You were a child once, inhabiting rooms of play, filled with toys and imagination. Then you were a teenager, inhabiting rooms of doubt, fear, and rebellion. Then an adult, inhabiting rooms of work, ambition, longing. Which of those rooms was yours? Which one did you own? None. You merely passed through, convinced for a time that the room defined you. But when you left it, when the furniture dissolved and new walls rose around you, you realized that no ownership remained. The rooms continue to change, and you continue to wander. This is why suffering often feels so sharp. You mistake temporary rooms for permanent ones. You believe, this sadness is mine, this fear belongs to me. But the truth is different. These emotions are tenants, not owners. They arrive, they stay for a time, they leave. If you do not cling to them, you realize they were never yours to begin with. Consciousness holds them, but claims nothing. The rooms are empty of ownership, filled only with presence. Philosophers like David Hume noticed this centuries ago. When he searched for the self, he found only perceptions coming and going like actors on a stage. No actor remained, no permanent owner ever appeared. Just impressions, just experiences, just momentary tenants. In the same way, if you search through your own awareness right now, you will not find an owner of the rooms. You will find thoughts, emotions, sensations, but no thinker, no feeler, no perceiver, only the rooms themselves. And what about silence? Sometimes the rooms are empty. No thoughts, no memories, no emotions. Just space. Does that emptiness belong to you? Or does it simply exist, as neutral and ownerless as the air outside? The more you look, the more you realize even silence resists ownership. It is not your silence. It is simply silence. Consciousness is not a house you own, but a house you temporarily inhabit, never claiming title, never holding the deed. There is a strange liberation in this. If the rooms are not yours, then their contents do not define you. You do not need to identify with every shadow, every echo, every passing tenant. You can allow them to move in and out without attachment. You can wander the house freely, knowing that ownership was only ever an illusion. And in that freedom, you begin to glimpse consciousness, not as a person with possessions, but as a place, vast and unclaimed, open to whatever arises. Tonight, as you rest, notice the rooms of your own awareness. Notice how some are filled with thought, others with memory, others with silence. Notice how none of them last. Notice how none of them bear your name, and ask yourself, if the rooms are ownerless, then who are you? Perhaps the answer is unsettling. Perhaps the answer is freeing. Either way, the truth remains. Consciousness is a place filled with rooms that belong to no one, and you too are only passing through. Every explorer needs a map, and in the labyrinth of consciousness, you imagine you carry one. You believe you can chart the terrain of your thoughts, mark the borders of memory, sketch the boundaries of self, but the maps you draw inside your awareness are peculiar. No sooner do you sketch a line than it fades. No sooner do you write a name than the ink dissolves. These are maps that erase themselves as quickly as they are made, and still you keep drawing them, desperate to navigate a place that cannot be fixed on paper. Think of how you plan your life. You imagine the future as a path. Education leading to work, work leading to success, success leading to happiness. You chart it like a map with milestones, destinations, arrows pointing forward. And yet, how often has the path vanished beneath your feet? How often has the map betrayed you, erasing the lines just as you arrived at the point where they should have guided you? The moment you think you know the way, the ink smudges, the page empties, and you realize that the map was never the territory. It was only a fragile sketch, easily undone. Memory works the same way. You try to map the past, arranging it into neat sequences. This happened first, that happened next, then came this moment after. But revisit those events, and the sequence shifts. A detail disappears. A moment you thought crucial no longer appears. Another event, once forgotten, forces itself onto the page. The past you thought you had mapped reveals itself as unstable. Each act of remembering redraws the map. Each retelling erases and rewrites. What you call memory is not a fixed archive, but a shifting sketch, a self-erasing chart of where you believe you have been. Science confirms this unsettling truth. Cognitive psychology shows that memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Each recall is an act of imagination. Neurons fire in patterns that approximate the past but never reproduce it exactly. In this sense, your map of memory is like sand drawn on the shore, rewritten with every wave. The more you trace it, the more it changes. The map erases itself, even as you believe you are preserving it. And what about identity? Isn't it also a map? You say, I am this, I am not that, I was here, I will go there. You draw lines around yourself, charting where you begin and others end. But identity, too, erases itself. What you believed yesterday is not what you believe today. What you felt certain about in youth dissolves with age. The person you thought you were no longer exists, erased by time, rewritten by experience. You redraw the map daily, insisting it is permanent, when in truth it is as fleeting as chalk on a sidewalk, waiting for rain. Dreams expose the fragility most clearly. In dreams, you wander landscapes that feel stable. You might even carry maps within them, streets, routes, plans. Yet as you move, the geography shifts. The street you marked bends differently. The house you located vanishes. The destination you sought erases itself the moment you reach it. Dreams remind you of what waking life hides. All maps are temporary. All maps are illusions of control. Consciousness itself refuses to be fixed. Philosophers like Alfred Korzybski warned us. The map is not the territory. But here, the paradox is sharper. In consciousness, the map is not even the map. It cannot hold itself. The act of drawing already erases. To name a thought is to lose it. To define the self is to dissolve it. The very tools you use to chart awareness, language, memory, belief, are also the forces that rewrite it. You are always sketching on paper that refuses ink, always drawing lines that vanish as soon as they are traced. And yet, the impulse to map never stops. You need it to feel oriented. You need to believe you know where you are, even if the lines shift beneath you. Maps comfort you, even false ones. They tell you there is order, direction, purpose. They convince you the labyrinth has an end. The corridors lead somewhere. The rooms belong to someone. Without the map, you might feel lost. With it, you at least pretend you are found. But perhaps there is another way to wander. Perhaps the truth of the erasing map is not despair, but liberation. If no map endures, then no mistake is permanent. If all maps erase themselves, then nothing fixes you in place. The path you thought defined you can dissolve. The boundaries you believed imprisoned, you can vanish. Each moment is a new page, clean again, ready for a sketch that will in time also fade. You are not trapped by the map. You are freed by its impermanence. Notice how this plays out even in small moments. You make a plan for the day, unexpected events undo it. You feel frustrated at first, your map has betrayed you. But later, you realize the day unfolded differently, perhaps even better than your chart allowed. The erased map gave you a new direction. The same happens with relationships, careers, dreams. What you thought was failure was only the erasure of one sketch, leaving space for another. Consciousness insists on drawing, but it also insists on erasing. Both are essential. Tonight, as you rest, imagine holding such a map. Watch as the ink dissolves beneath your fingers. The lines vanish. The paper returns to blankness. At first you may feel disoriented, even afraid. But stay with it. Notice how the absence of lines reveals something else. Openness. The page is not destroyed. It is cleared. And in that clearing lies the truth of consciousness. Not a fixed geography, but a living space, forever redrawing itself, forever erasing itself, forever free. So let the maps erase themselves. Let the lines dissolve. Do not cling to the chart, nor despair when it fades. Consciousness is not a territory to be mapped. It is the erasure itself, the shifting, the endless redrawing. To live inside it is not to hold a map, but to walk freely, knowing that no map could ever capture the place where you are. Every room has corners, sharp intersections where walls meet, giving structure to space. In the house of consciousness, corners also appear. They give the illusion of edges, of separations, of boundaries where one thing ends and another begins. Yet if you lean closer, these corners dissolve, they fold into themselves, revealing that the divisions you thought were solid were only illusions created by perspective. Consciousness presents corners to comfort you, to convince you that there is order, but beneath them lies only continuity, an unbroken space pretending to be segmented. Think of how you divide your mind into categories. This is thought, that is feeling. This is memory, that is imagination. Each division feels neat, like corners separating walls. Yet notice how easily they blur. A thought evokes a feeling, a memory bends into imagination. An image from a dream becomes indistinguishable from recollection. The corners fold, refusing to stay sharp. What seemed like distinct boundaries reveal themselves as intersections of the same endless surface. Science reflects this too. Neuroscience shows that brain regions once believed to be specialized. This corner for vision, that corner for emotion, are not so simple. They overlap, share functions, activate together. The supposed partitions dissolve under closer study. What you thought were corners turn out to be folds, overlapping networks that cannot be separated without losing their essence. Consciousness refuses to be divided. It plays at separation while remaining whole. Have you noticed how identity itself builds corners? You say, I am kind, but not cruel. I am strong but not weak. I am me, not you. These are corners of self-definition, walls meeting at sharp angles. But watch how easily they fold. A person you thought you could never become suddenly appears in you under pressure. A kindness shades into cruelty when circumstances twist. A boundary between me and you folds during intimacy, when your emotions spill into another, and theirs into you. The corners you trusted vanish, the illusion of separation collapses, and you realize identity is not a fixed architecture, it is only folds in a fabric that was never cut apart. Dreams reveal this more vividly. In dreams, corners do not behave as they should. You turn one expecting a hallway, but instead find yourself back where you began, or you step into a corner and watch it melt, bending into impossible shapes, folding space until you lose orientation entirely. These dream corners are consciousness reminding you that boundaries are never real. They are constructs, illusions meant to give you the comfort of order in a place that resists all geometry. Philosophers have noticed this folding for centuries. Heraclitus declared that opposites are one. That day becomes night, life becomes death, all distinctions folding into one another. Non-dual traditions echo the same. What seems divided is only the play of perception. Corners are the illusion that reality can be segmented, but look long enough, and they collapse. There is no separation, only continuity pretending to be divided. Consider how time creates corners. You think of past, present, future as distinct, meeting at edges like the corners of a room. Yet as you examine them, they blur. The past exists only as memory in the present. The future exists only as imagination in the present. The present itself cannot be held. It vanishes as soon as you name it. These corners fold into each other, revealing not three separate compartments, but a single flowing awareness, endlessly self-erasing. And what about morality? You divide experience into good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark. These are the sharpest corners of all. But even here the folding persists. What seems good in one context turns harmful in another. What appears wrong at first may reveal hidden kindness. Every moral corner blurs under enough light. Consciousness itself does not draw lines between right and wrong. It holds all as passing shadows across its surface, folding into and out of each other without permanence. Shadows at the corners of your inner room can trick you most. You see shapes that are not there, figures imagined from fragments of perception. The corner is where illusion thrives. You fill the space with projections, with fears, with expectations. But when you step closer, nothing remains, only light folding into shadow. Shadow folding into light. The corner was never occupied. The illusion was only your projection, vanishing upon inspection. There is a peculiar freedom in realizing this. If corners are illusions, then separation is too. You are not as divided from others as you believe. You are not as cut apart from the world as you assume. The boundaries between self and other, thought and feeling, past and present, all of them fold into the same continuous fabric. To see this is to recognize that consciousness is not a fractured room, but a seamless expanse. The corners exist only to give the illusion of order within endlessness. Tonight, as you lie in your silent hall, notice the corners. Notice where you believe divisions exist, between body and mind, self and other, memory and imagination. Watch as these corners fold when you press against them. Watch as the walls you trusted melt into each other, revealing that the house of consciousness is not made of rigid geometry. It is made of folds, illusions of separation within a space that never divided itself. So let the corners fold. Let the boundaries dissolve. You do not need the illusion of sharp edges to navigate this house. You can wander freely, knowing that every separation is only temporary, every corner an illusion, every wall a fold in the seamless fabric of awareness. And perhaps then you will realize there was never a room at all, only the vastness pretending to be divided, only continuity playing at corners, only consciousness itself, endless, indivisible, whole. When you imagine progress, you picture a straight line, one step leading to another, each taking you farther from the start, closer to the goal. But inside the house of consciousness, paths rarely behave this way. They do not stretch forward in neat sequences. They wind backward again, looping into the very places you thought you had left behind. This is one of the most disorienting qualities of awareness. It convinces you that you are moving forward, even as it circles you back into old corridors, old patterns, old selves. Think of the thoughts you believed you had outgrown. Doubts you faced years ago return suddenly, just as sharp, just as heavy. Fears you thought resolved resurface in dreams or quiet moments. You tell yourself, I already walked this path. I should not be here again. And yet here you are, back where you started. The mind builds loops, not ladders. It carries you through cycles that repeat, insisting each time that this moment is new, though it is only an echo of what came before. Psychologists call this rumination, the endless revisiting of past concerns, replaying mistakes, rehearsing conversations that cannot be changed. The paths of rumination are never forward. They spiral back, taking you to the same mental crossroads again and again. Each step feels urgent, necessary, as though the solution lies just ahead. But when you arrive, you realize you are only back in the same place. The path erases progress, winding backward, until you cannot tell if you have moved at all. And what of memory itself? Memory is not a timeline but a spiral. You think you recall events in order, but recall always brings you back, collapsing the years into a single moment. A childhood scene resurfaces in adulthood, vivid and alive, collapsing decades into an instant. In that moment, you are both child and adult, both past and present, as if the path of time had bent backward into itself. Consciousness does not walk straight through time. It loops, folds, returns. This looping even shapes identity. You believe you grow, change, progress towards some final version of yourself. But then you notice how the same patterns return, the same insecurities, the same desires, the same mistakes. You are not a straight path toward selfhood, but a cycle of repetitions, each turn convincing you it is new, though it is only familiar. Ground walked again. Identity is not linear, it is recursive, endlessly circling back upon itself. Philosophers noticed this centuries ago. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence. The idea that life repeats itself endlessly, each moment lived again and again, in infinite cycles. Samsara, in Buddhist thought, describes existence itself as cyclical, rebirth upon rebirth, paths winding backward again and again, until enlightenment breaks the loop. These teachings remind you the backward path is not failure, it is the essence of being conscious at all. You do not escape the loop, because the loop is what it means to live. Dreams expose this even more vividly. You dream of escaping a maze, running forward with urgency, only to find yourself back at the beginning. You dream of climbing a staircase, believing you are nearing the top, only to return to the first step. These loops are not accidents. They are the mind revealing its own shape, recursive, cyclical, incapable of linear escape. In dreams and in waking life alike, the path bends backward. But do not mistake this backward winding for despair. There is beauty in returning. A song you once loved takes on new meaning years later, looping you back into the emotions of your younger self, while layering them with the wisdom of age. A mistake repeated teaches more the second time than it did the first. A fear revisited allows deeper courage than before. The backward path is not punishment. It is invitation to see familiar places with new eyes, to realize that repetition does not mean stagnation but deepening. Even science echoes this truth. The brain's default mode network, the system active when you are not focused on tasks, loops endlessly, replaying fragments of thought, circling back to unresolved concerns. Evolution may have shaped it this way to help you learn, to help you rehearse, to help you integrate. The backward winding is not malfunction. It is survival. It is the very mechanism that turns experience into meaning. Without the loop, there would be no learning, no memory, no growth at all. And yet, the backward path can feel cruel. You want progress. You want the assurance that each step takes you farther, closer to an end. The loop frustrates this desire. It makes you question whether change is real, whether time matters, whether you are condemned to walk the same ground forever. But perhaps the problem is not the loop. It is your expectation of straightness. Consciousness was never a road. It was always a spiral. Imagine walking through a forest on a winding trail. At times you see the same trees again, and think you are lost. But look closer, and you realize you are higher now. The perspective shifted. The spiral has carried you back. Yes, but also forward in ways not visible at ground level. Consciousness works the same. Each backward step contains subtle difference. Slight change, quiet growth. The path repeats, but it also deepens. The spiral is not a circle. It is a helix, winding backward while still moving on. Tonight, as you rest, notice the loops in your own mind. Notice how thoughts return, how memories resurface, how patterns repeat. Instead of resisting, instead of demanding a straight line, allow the spiral, allow the backward path. See what is new in what feels old, what is deeper in what seems familiar. For consciousness was never meant to carry you forward into a final destination. It was meant to fold you back, again and again, until you realize there was never anywhere to go. The path winds not to an exit, but to itself. Walk through the house of consciousness long enough, and you will eventually encounter mirrors. They hang in unexpected places at the end of hallways, inside forgotten rooms, behind doors you did not mean to open. You step closer, expecting reflection, and you do see yourself, or something like yourself. But these mirrors are strange. They are not fixed to walls, not framed by wood or nailed to stone. They hang on nothing, suspended in air, reflecting without support. And when you look closer, you begin to question not just the reflection, but the mirror itself. Why do mirrors appear at all, inside awareness? Because consciousness is recursive. It not only perceives, but perceives itself, perceiving. You do not simply think, you think about thinking. You do not only feel, you feel about feeling. The mirror is this doubling back, this reflection upon reflection. It convinces you there is a self to be seen, a person gazing from within. But if the mirror is hung on nothing, if it floats without anchor, then what does that say about the self it reflects? Perhaps it too hangs on nothing. Perhaps it is no more stable than the mirror itself. Consider how identity works. You look in the mirror of memory and see a child, then a teenager, then an adult. You insist these reflections add up to a single you, yet each one is different. The child's face no longer exists. The teenager's body has vanished. Even the adult you were yesterday is gone. What ties them together? Only reflection, only the sense that when you gaze into consciousness, you see continuity. But the mirror does not prove continuity. It only shows whatever passes before it. Psychology calls this the narrative self. The story you tell about who you are. Each reflection becomes a chapter. Each chapter convinces you the story is whole, yet the story is fragile. Forget a chapter, and the mirror changes. Rewrite a memory, and the reflection shifts. Traumatic experiences can shatter it altogether, leaving you unsure who you are. Joyful ones can transform it, showing you a version of yourself you never knew. The mirror reflects, but it does not fix. It is hung on nothing, free to swing, to tilt, to distort. Dreams demonstrate this instability vividly. In dreams you sometimes see yourself in a mirror, but the reflection is wrong. Your face changes shape. Your body shifts into another. Sometimes the mirror shows no image at all. Other times it reveals someone else entirely. These dream mirrors are not broken. They are revealing the truth. The self is not fixed. The reflection you see in waking life is just as malleable, just as fragile. You trust it only because it repeats itself long enough to convince you. But the mirror could tilt at any moment, and the reflection would change. Philosophers have always been haunted by mirrors. Lacan described the mirror stage, the moment when infants first recognize their reflection and begin to form a sense of self. But that recognition is a misrecognition, for the reflection is not truly them. It is an image, external, incomplete. From the beginning, the self is built on illusion, on seeing a face and believing it proves identity. Buddhism echoes this, describing the self as a mirage, convincing but empty. The mirror reflects, but there is no substance behind the glass. And what about thought itself? Each time you reflect on your own mind, you are standing before one of these suspended mirrors. You analyze, judge, evaluate. You say, I am this kind of person. I should be better. I am not enough. I am proud of myself. But notice who is doing the judging. Who is standing outside the mirror, gazing in. It is only another reflection, another doubling. Consciousness creates endless mirrors, each reflecting the last, none anchored to a wall. You never reach the original. You only encounter reflection after reflection, until you forget there was nothing holding them in place. Sometimes these mirrors trap you. You become obsessed with how you appear to yourself, to others. You polish the reflection endlessly, trying to make it flawless. But the more you polish, the more distorted it becomes. Self-consciousness is this trap, staring too long at the mirror, mistaking reflection for truth. The hall of mirrors convinces you that identity is solid, when in truth, it is only light bouncing on glass, suspended in nothingness. And yet, mirrors can also free you. When you realize the reflection is not solid, not permanent, not anchored, you stop clinging to it. You can watch your self-image shift without panic, as naturally as shadows moving across a floor. You can recognize that who you are is not fixed in the glass. It is fluid, changing, empty of permanence. The mirror hangs on nothing, and so too does the self. Freedom lies not in clinging to the reflection, but in seeing through it. Even science hints at this. Neuroscience shows there is no central self in the brain. No single structure generates identity. Instead, countless processes reflect one another: memory, perception, emotion, language, like mirrors facing mirrors. The self you experience is an emergent reflection, not a substance. It hangs, unsupported, yet convincing. The brain does not house a master. It houses a hall of mirrors. Tonight, as you rest, imagine standing before one of these suspended mirrors. Look into it. See your reflection, familiar, yet strange. Watch as it shifts, blurs, dissolves. Notice how the mirror itself hangs in emptiness. No wall, no nail, no anchor. And let yourself feel the truth. Yourself is the same. A reflection, hung on nothing, convincing for a moment, dissolving the next. Consciousness is not the reflection. It is the space in which mirrors appear, suspended, fragile, endlessly shifting. So do not cling. Do not polish. Do not fear when the mirror changes. It was never fixed. It was never anchored. The reflection was never the real you. It was only light in glass, hung on nothing, drifting in the endless room of awareness. Everywhere you look, life insists on boundaries. Skin separates you from the world. Walls divide rooms. Maps carve nations. Even thoughts draw lines. This is me. That is not. This is true. That is false. Boundaries reassure. They give shape to chaos, edges to infinity. But in the house of consciousness, these boundaries do not hold. If you watch closely enough, if you lean into awareness deeply enough, you see them soften, blur, dissolve. What once felt sharp melts into vastness, and you realize that separation was never real. Consider your own body. You believe your skin marks your edge, that what lies inside is you, and what lies outside is other. But your breath ignores this. Each inhalation pulls the world into you. Each exhalation gives yourself back to the world. Air does not care about skin, nor does sound. It enters through ears and vibrates within. Light passes through eyes, dissolving the line between inner and outer. Even the food you eat, the water you drink, cross the boundary constantly, becoming part of you, then leaving again. Where then is the edge? The body you call yours is a process of exchange, not a fortress. The boundary melts into the vastness of everything that flows through it. Thought follows the same pattern. You insist that your thoughts are private, contained within your mind. Yet, where did they come from? The language you use was given to you by others. The beliefs you hold were shaped by culture, by family, by history. Every thought is a borrowed guest. You call them yours, but they belong to no one. They are currents moving through the collective, flowing into you for a time before flowing out again. Consciousness tricks you with boundaries. My thought, your thought, but the reality is an endless exchange. The lines vanish. Awareness is not personal. It is vast, open, shared. Memory too dissolves its borders. Recall a moment from years ago and notice how others' voices live within it, how places and events beyond your control shape its walls. The memory is not sealed inside you. It stretches into parents, teachers, strangers, landscapes, histories. It is woven from vastness, not isolation. Even your most private recollection rests upon threads that extend beyond you. The supposed boundary of selfhood melts the moment you notice how much of you comes from elsewhere. Science suggests the same. Neuroscientists studying brain networks see no isolated center of self. Instead, the brain functions as patterns of interaction, systems exchanging signals with body and environment. The self is not a sealed container. It is a process of interconnection. Cognitive science even speaks of the extended mind, the idea that notebooks, tools, and even other people's knowledge are part of your thinking. Boundaries in this sense are conveniences, not truths. They melt into the vast network of interaction that consciousness truly is. And dreams make this truth unavoidable. In dreams, the boundary between you and world collapses completely. You are both the dreamer and every character, both the observer and the landscape itself. You run from a monster, not realizing you also created it. You fall into an ocean, not realizing you are also the water. Dreams remind you that the separation of self and other is only a waking illusion. The vastness was always the truth. Philosophers and mystics have long spoken of this melting. Advaita Vedanta declares that the self is not separate but one with all existence. Tat Tvamaz, you are that. Zen Buddhism insists that when you search for the self, it vanishes, leaving only vastness. Even Western thinkers like Spinoza described existence as a single substance, everything melting into one infinite being. Boundaries exist only in perception. Reality itself knows no division. But notice the paradox. Boundaries are illusions, yet you need them. Without skin, you could not survive. Without categories, you could not think. Without maps, you could not navigate. The melting of boundaries does not mean their destruction. It means seeing their provisional nature. They are tools, not truths. They serve for a time, then dissolve into the greater vastness that always holds them. This is why experiences of awe feel transformative. Standing before mountains, oceans, or star-filled skies, the sense of boundary softens. You feel small, yet not diminished, dissolved into something greater. The vastness strips away edges. For a moment, you forget yourself, not as annihilation but as merging. The boundary melts, and you realize you were never separate at all. And what about death? The greatest boundary of all, the line between life and nothing. You fear it because it feels absolute. But look again, the body returns to earth. Breath returns to air. Thoughts return to silence. Nothing vanishes. It only melts into vastness. The boundary of death is not destruction but transition, the final proof that separation was never real. Consciousness itself, if it is a place, may not end at all. The room remains, even when the tenants depart. So tonight, as you rest, notice the boundaries you cling to. Notice the edge of your skin, the line of your thoughts, the fence of your identity. Watch them carefully. See how porous they are, how easily they blur. See how every supposed edge is crossed constantly by breath, sound, memory, feeling, and allow them to soften, allow them to melt. For when boundaries dissolve, you do not vanish. You expand, you open into the vastness that was always there, waiting behind the illusion of separation. Consciousness is not a walled cell. It is a horizonless expanse pretending to have walls. Boundaries are only the game it plays, the scaffolding it erects for the sake of orientation. But beneath them lies the truth. No edge, no division, no separation, only vastness, only endless space, only awareness itself, limitless, indivisible, eternal. Deep within the house of consciousness lies a chamber unlike the others. It is quiet at first, almost eerily so. But if you linger, you begin to hear faint sounds. They are not present thoughts, not current memories, but voices long forgotten, whispers of people, moments, feelings that once lived inside you, and then slipped away. This is the chamber of forgotten voices, and though you do not often visit it, you carry it with you always. Have you ever noticed how a word or sound suddenly triggers something from long ago? A voice you had not recalled in years returns, your grandmother calling your name, a teacher's laugh, a friend's anger. These fragments rise without warning, as though the chamber released them for a moment, before letting them sink back into silence. You never chose to keep them. You never chose to lose them. Consciousness stores them in ways you cannot control, layering the chamber with voices that surface only when the walls allow them to. Science describes this as the unconscious. Neurons that once fired together leave traces, networks of memory hidden from daily recall. But psychology also reveals how fragile these voices are. Memories fade, distort, or vanish altogether, yet their traces linger. Even when you cannot recall the details, the emotion remains. A forgotten lullaby still soothes. A forgotten warning still stirs unease. The chamber does not preserve words perfectly. It preserves their resonance, their echoes, their moods. Dreams often open this chamber. You hear voices in dreams that you do not consciously remember. A stranger speaks with the voice of someone from your childhood. A parent's phrase returns, though you had not recalled it in years. The chamber leaks into the dream, filling its rooms with fragments you thought were gone. And upon waking you may wonder, how could I remember what I had forgotten? But the truth is, you never remembered. The voice never left. It was always there, waiting in silence. Philosophers too have sensed this chamber. Plato spoke of an amnesis, the idea that learning is remembering, that knowledge comes from voices buried deep within the soul. Freud described repressed memories, voices deliberately locked away, whispering from behind closed doors until they emerge disguised. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, voices not just personal but ancestral, archetypes echoing through generations. Each perspective points to the same truth. The chamber is vast, filled with more voices than you will ever consciously know. And what about guilt or regret? These too live in the chamber. Words you once said harshly return when least expected, repeating themselves in moments of quiet. Mistakes you thought buried resurface, not as clear memories but as whispers of shame. They remind you that forgetting is never complete. The chamber holds everything, even what you try to erase. Consciousness may let you look away, but the voices remain, echoing faintly in the background. But the chamber also holds beauty. Forgotten kindnesses, forgotten laughter, forgotten moments of love return just as suddenly. A smell, a melody, a phrase can unlock them, flooding you with warmth you thought was lost. The chamber does not only preserve pain, it preserves joy, waiting for the right trigger to release it again. Forgotten voices can comfort as much as they can wound. There is, however, a paradox. If the chamber holds forgotten voices, who is the one who forgets, and who is the one who remembers when they return? You search for the owner of the chamber, but find no one. The voices do not belong to you any more than thoughts or memories do. They arise, linger, fade, but no master claims them. Consciousness itself is the chamber, and the voices are its natural echoes. Ownership was always an illusion. And what about the voices that never surface again? Entire lifetimes are filled with words you will never recall. Thousands of conversations, millions of sentences. Where did they go? Did they vanish, or do they still hum faintly in corners of the chamber you will never hear? Perhaps they remain, woven into your unconscious patterns, shaping choices without your awareness. Or perhaps they dissolved completely, erased like chalk from a board. Consciousness never tells you which voices are kept and which are lost. It only reminds you, from time to time, that forgetting is never as final as you believe. Notice too how the chamber is not just personal. Cultural voices echo there. Phrases from television, songs from childhood, sayings of ancestors you never met. These voices shape how you think, what you expect, even how you dream. The chamber of forgotten voices is also a collective chamber, carrying fragments of the world inside you. You may believe your thoughts are yours alone, but they are crowded with echoes, most of them forgotten, yet still alive. Tonight, as you rest, listen closely. What voices hum beneath your thoughts? Which phrases, which tones, which whispers still echo in your chamber? Some may comfort, some may disturb, some may confuse, but all of them are part of the architecture of consciousness. They prove that forgetting is never complete, that awareness is larger than what you notice. And perhaps if you listen long enough, you will realize you are not the speaker, not the owner, not even the listener. You are the chamber itself, vast and echoing, filled with forgotten voices that rise and fade without end. If you pay attention to perception itself, you notice its rhythm. A sound strikes, then fades. A sight appears, then blinks away. A thought arises, then dissolves. It feels continuous, as if experience flows like an unbroken stream. But look closer, and you discover the truth. There are spaces between each perception. Tiny gaps, silences, intervals when nothing happens. Most of the time, you ignore them, filling them in with the illusion of continuity. But the more carefully you watch, the more undeniable they become. Consciousness is not solid. It flickers. It breathes in pulses of appearance and disappearance. Think of vision. Science shows that your eyes make rapid movements, called saccades, several times each second. Between these movements, you are effectively blind, yet you never notice. The brain fills the spaces, stitching fragments into a seamless picture. The same happens with sound. Moments of silence, between syllables, between notes, between breaths. Your awareness smooths them over, pretending continuity. But if you tune in, if you listen closely, you can feel the spaces, you can sense the pauses where nothing occurs. Meditation traditions have long emphasized this. Practitioners are taught to notice not just the breath, but the gap between breaths. Not just the thought, but the silence between thoughts. At first, these gaps feel fleeting, slippery, impossible to hold, but with practice they widen. You begin to rest in them, to recognize that the space is as real as the perception itself. In fact, it may be more real, for while perceptions come and go, the space remains. Dreams reveal this rhythm in a different way. You may believe the dream flows smoothly, but often it skips. One moment you are in a room, the next on a street. The transition is missing. A gap has occurred, yet in the dream you do not notice. Consciousness fills the spaces, inventing continuity where none existed. Waking life is no different. You believe in seamless experience, but the truth is countless gaps hold it together, like the invisible thread in a necklace of beads. Philosophers have wrestled with this paradox. William James described consciousness as a stream, yet even he admitted it was filled with transitive states, moments that seemed empty, connecting one perception to another. Husserl spoke of retention and pretension, the holding of just past and just future perceptions to create the illusion of continuity. But what lies between? Nothing, or perhaps everything. The spaces themselves are the canvas upon which perception is painted. And what of identity? Isn't it also built from gaps disguised as continuity? You believe you are the same person across years, But between each remembered moment lies absence. You do not recall every instant. You recall fragments, and the spaces between them are erased. You fill them with the story of a self, but look honestly, and the story collapses. Who you are is not continuous. It is stitched from gaps, pauses, forgotten intervals. The self exists only because you refuse to see the spaces. This realization can feel unsettling. If consciousness flickers, if gaps interrupt every moment, then what holds you together? What keeps the world from vanishing in the spaces? Perhaps nothing. Or perhaps the spaces themselves are what consciousness truly is. Perceptions are only temporary guests. The spaces are permanent. They are the silent room that exists between each echo, each image, each word. You are not the beads. You are the string. Neuroscience offers a strange confirmation. Brain scans reveal oscillations, waves of activity that rise and fall. Consciousness may not be constant at all, but rhythmic, pulsing in and out many times each second. Some researchers even suggest that awareness disappears entirely for brief intervals, reappearing so quickly you never notice. If true, then you are vanishing constantly, dissolving into nothingness between perceptions, only to return again. Continuity is illusion. You live in flickers. And yet, there is beauty in this. If perceptions vanish, then so do pains, so do fears, so do regrets. They cannot last unbroken. They dissolve into gaps, giving you space to breathe. Even suffering flickers, disappearing between beats. And joy too, though fleeting, returns again and again, strung across the spaces like lights across a dark field. The gaps are not empty. They are invitations, pauses that hold possibility. Notice how music depends on silence. Without spaces between notes, there would be no melody. Without rests, no rhythm. The silence makes the sound meaningful, so too in consciousness. The spaces between perceptions give shape to experience. Without them, awareness would collapse into noise, undifferentiated and unbearable. The gaps are what allow you to hear, to see, to think. They are not failures of consciousness, but its foundation. Tonight, as you rest, pay attention to these spaces. Listen between breaths, between heartbeats, between thoughts. Notice how awareness flickers, how moments of nothingness cradle every perception. Do not fear the gaps. They do not erase you. They reveal you. You are not the passing perceptions, not the thoughts or feelings that vanish. You are the space that holds them, the silence that remains when they fade. So let the spaces widen. Let them deepen. Let them remind you that continuity was always a trick, an illusion stitched by habit. Consciousness is not the stream you thought it was. It is the vast stillness between each drop, the infinite silence between each sound. And when you finally notice, you may realize, the spaces were not empty after all. They were the essence of awareness itself, waiting all along between every perception you mistook for solid. Every house has passages, hallways meant to connect one place to another. In ordinary architecture, passages reassure you. They suggest movement, purpose, direction. Walk far enough, and you will arrive somewhere. But in the house of consciousness, passages do not behave this way. You wander them endlessly, waiting for an arrival that never comes. Each turn convinces you that the destination is near, yet each step only extends the corridor. These are passages without destination, paths that exist not to deliver you somewhere, but to remind you that there may be nowhere to go. Think of how often thought works this way. You begin with a question, why did that happen? The question spawns another, what does it mean? That one leads to yet another. What should I do next? And on it goes, each thought promising resolution, each thought convincing you that an end waits ahead, but when you reach it, you find not an answer, but another question. The corridor has no door, the passage stretches further, looping back, folding into itself. Consciousness offers the illusion of progress, but the destination forever recedes. Philosophers have wrestled with this endlessly. Every attempt to define the self, reality, or truth produces another layer of questioning. Descartes concluded, I think, therefore I am. But even that foundation cracked under scrutiny. What is the I? What is thought itself? Each answer became another corridor. Existentialists like Sartre insisted freedom was the destination, but then asked freedom toward what? Again, another passage unfolded. Philosophy itself is proof that consciousness contains no final room, only corridors that extend as far as thought dares to wander. Psychology, too, reveals these passages in practice. Obsessive thought patterns trap people in loops where no resolution ever arrives. Anxiety convinces you that if you think long enough, you'll find safety. Depression convinces you that if you reflect deeply enough, you'll find meaning, yet the reflection leads nowhere. The corridor lengthens, the destination never appears, and still you walk, because stopping feels impossible. The passage becomes your home. Dreams demonstrate this in haunting ways. You run down hallways that never end. You walk toward doors that vanish when you approach. You climb staircases that spiral back to where you began. These dream passages are not mistakes. They are consciousness revealing its own structure, endless movement without conclusion, motion without arrival. Waking life hides this truth behind routines, goals, and accomplishments. But the dream reminds you, the passage never truly leads out. And what about time itself? You imagine time as a corridor, each moment leading to the next, each step carrying you toward a destination. But what is that destination? The future? Death? Eternity? Look closer, and you realize time itself behaves like the passages of consciousness, forever stretching, never arriving. The future never appears. It is always postponed, always out of reach, always around the next corner. You walk endlessly, believing in an arrival that never comes. There is a paradox here. Passages without destination frustrate you. You want arrival, closure, certainty. But what if the lack of destination is not failure but design? Perhaps consciousness builds these passages not to deliver you somewhere but to keep you moving. The wandering itself is the point. The corridor is not a mistake. It is the essence of being aware, motion without conclusion, questioning without final answer, experience without ultimate destination. Consider identity again. You search for yourself, convinced that deep reflection will reveal who you really are. Each discovery feels closer. I am kind, I am broken, I am strong, I am lost. But none of them satisfy. None of them hold. The passage stretches on, identity dissolving into further questioning. There is no final room where the real you waits. There is only the endless corridor of self-reflection forever deferring the answer. Neuroscience hints at this too. The brain's networks generate predictive models, expectations of what will come next. These models keep you moving, promising arrival, but arrival never comes. The brain constantly revises, updates, defers. Consciousness, in this sense, is prediction without conclusion, passage without destination. It functions by keeping you searching, not by allowing you to arrive. This can feel exhausting, but it can also feel freeing. If there is no destination, then there is no way to fail. You cannot miss the end, if no end exists. You cannot fall short if the passage itself is the point. Life, then, is not about reaching some final room, but about walking the corridor with open eyes, noticing its details, its textures, its illusions. The purpose is not arrival, but presence. Imagine walking a passage lit by torches. At first you focus on the door you believe lies ahead, but as it fails to appear, you notice the light on the walls, the flicker of shadow, the echoes of your footsteps. You realize the corridor itself is the experience. Arrival was never promised, the walk was always the point. Consciousness works the same way. Each step matters, not because it brings you closer to an end, but because it is itself the unfolding of awareness. Tonight, as you drift deeper, notice the passages within your own mind. Notice how thoughts promise arrival, but only lead to further thoughts. Notice how questions open into more questions, how goals dissolve into further goals. Instead of resisting, allow the wandering, let the lack of destination become its own revelation. For consciousness was never built to deliver you to a final room. It was built to keep you walking, endlessly, through corridors that stretch without end. So, let the passage extend. Let it refuse closure. Do not demand a destination. There is none to be found. There is only motion, only wandering, only the living of each step. And in that realization lies freedom. You do not need to arrive. You only need to walk. Consciousness is not the door at the end of the passage. It is the passage itself, endless, unfolding, without destination, and without end. Every house rests on floors, solid surfaces that reassure you with stability. You step, and the ground answers back. You trust it will hold, but in the house of consciousness, floors behave differently. They drift away. Just when you think you are standing firmly, the ground beneath dissolves, shifting into something else, leaving you suspended. Awareness convinces you of solidity, but the solidity never lasts. Every flaw is temporary, every step a reminder that stability is an illusion. Consider how moods work. You may wake feeling grounded, steady, calm. Then, without warning, the floor shifts. A sudden memory surfaces, an intrusive thought intrudes, and your calmness vanishes. What you stood on seconds ago is gone. In its place, unease or sorrow or excitement. The floor of mood drifts constantly, never letting you anchor for long. You think you are secure, but security is only a passing surface, moving beneath your feet. Memory acts the same. You tell yourself, I know what happened. The floor of certainty feels strong, but then new information arrives, or another perspective intrudes, and suddenly the memory shifts. Details you trusted dissolve, replaced by contradictions. The ground gives way. You realize your memory was not stone but water, rippling with each recall. Every time you remember, the floor drifts a little more, until certainty itself collapses. Even perception behaves this way. You look at the world and assume it is fixed, but notice how quickly the ground shifts. A shadow at dusk transforms into a figure. A sound you mishear becomes words that were never spoken. Your brain corrects constantly, redrawing surfaces. What felt solid dissolves in an instant, leaving you startled. The floors of perception are unstable, drifting with each new glance, each new sound. Consciousness convinces you of stability, but its foundations are always moving. Science has uncovered this instability. Neuroscientists describe perception as prediction, the brain constantly guessing what reality is, then updating when wrong. Each guess feels like solid ground, but it is provisional, temporary, drifting. Cognitive psychologists note the same in identity. The self you believe stable is reconstructed moment by moment, a story revised continuously. The floor of who you are shifts beneath you as relentlessly as the floor of perception. You walk, but each step rests on something that has already moved. Dreams show this most clearly. In dreams you may run across a floor that suddenly collapses, dropping you into another room, or the ground stretches like rubber, wobbling under your weight. Sometimes it vanishes entirely, leaving you floating. These shifting dream floors are not fantasy. They are consciousness revealing its true architecture. Stability is never guaranteed. Every floor is drifting, every step uncertain. Waking life hides this, but dreams remind you of what has always been true. Philosophers, too, have pointed to drifting floors. Descartes sought certainty, a foundation that could not be doubted. Yet, even his "I think, therefore I am" wavered under scrutiny. Skeptics argued that thought itself might be unreliable, that even existence could drift beneath analysis. Existentialists embraced this instability, declaring that there is no firm ground, only the responsibility of walking, despite the drift. Buddhism has long insisted on impermanence, anicca, the truth that nothing stays fixed, that all floors eventually slide away. And what about time? You trust it as a floor, a steady progression. But notice how time shifts. Hours slip quickly when you are absorbed, drag painfully when you are bored. Days vanish unnoticed, then one moment stretches into eternity. The floor of time itself drifts, refusing to remain steady beneath you. Consciousness does not rest on a single timeline. It slides, bends, distorts. What you thought was stone is only shifting sand. This drifting can be frightening. You want stability, certainty, permanence. When the floor moves, you feel lost. But perhaps the drift is not betrayal. Perhaps it is the essence of awareness itself. To be conscious is to walk on surfaces that refuse to stay still. The movement is not failure. It is the nature of the house. Floors drift, and in their drifting, you learn that stability was always an illusion. And yet, the drift is not without rhythm. Notice how floors sometimes drift you gently, like waves carrying a boat. A thought fades, and another appears. A mood shifts and you adjust. Other times the drift is sudden, like a trapdoor opening beneath you. A shocking loss, a sudden joy, a realization that upends everything. In both cases the truth remains. The ground was never fixed. You were always moving, even when you thought you stood still. Imagine walking across such a floor. At first you panic when it shifts, but over time you learn to walk differently. Not with rigid steps, but with balance, with flexibility, with readiness for change. You stop demanding permanence. You start flowing with the drift, and in that surrender, something opens. You realize freedom lies not in fixing the floor, but in moving with it. The ground does not need to be stable. You only need to stop insisting that it should be. Tonight, as you rest, notice the floors beneath your awareness. Notice how each thought, each feeling, each memory becomes ground for a moment, then drifts away. Watch how you try to cling, how you panic when it shifts. Then let go, allow the floor to move. Allow yourself to drift with it. For consciousness was never a house built on stone. It was always an ocean disguised as ground, a floor that drifts, a surface that moves endlessly beneath your steps. So do not demand stability. Do not fear the drift. Walk lightly, knowing each step rests on something already moving. The ground will slide, and you will slide with it. And in that motion, you will find not loss but truth. The floor was never meant to hold you. It was meant to carry you, drifting endlessly through the vastness of awareness. Inside the house of consciousness, not every space is crowded with echoes, memories, or shifting walls. Sometimes you stumble upon something simpler, a bench, waiting in the middle of an empty room. It has no decoration, no occupant, no purpose beyond its stillness. This empty bench in the mind is a symbol of pause, of stillness, of awareness unoccupied. And yet, because it is empty, it unsettles you. You are so accustomed to rooms filled with voices, furniture, corridors, that the bare presence of emptiness feels strange. Think of how rarely you sit in this space. Your mind is filled with motion, thoughts, feelings, tasks, stories. Even when nothing external presses you, your mind fills itself. You replay conversations, rehearse plans, narrate your life endlessly. But once in a while, when distraction fades and attention softens, you encounter the bench, a moment of silence, a pause between thoughts, a sudden awareness of simply being. The bench invites you to sit, but few linger long. Emptiness feels foreign, even frightening. Meditation traditions call this the gap, the interval where thought fades, where you rest without content. Practitioners spend years learning to recognize it, not because it is rare, but because it is subtle. It is always there, waiting, like a bench in the center of the room. Most walk past it, rushing toward the next corridor of thought. But when you sit, when you allow the pause, you realize the emptiness is not nothing. It is fullness disguised as absence. Science hints at this too. Neuroscience identifies the default mode network, active when you are lost in thought, storytelling, self-reflection. But when the network quiets through meditation, deep focus or flow states, the chatter subsides, the mind rests. For a moment, awareness exists without narration. The bench appears. This resting state is not emptiness in the sense of lack. It is emptiness in the sense of openness, space without clutter, consciousness without furniture. Dreams sometimes reveal the bench in startling ways. You may dream of empty rooms, deserted streets, abandoned stations. These images unsettle because you expect fullness. But perhaps they are dream versions of the same pause, the same empty bench waiting within. Dreams remind you that consciousness is not only movement, it is also stillness, and in that stillness, something profound waits. Philosophers have always circled around this emptiness. Taoist sages spoke of the usefulness of emptiness, the space inside a bowl, the silence between notes, the pause that gives meaning. Buddhist thinkers described shunyata, emptiness, not as void, but as the essence of reality, the openness from which all arises. Even modern philosophers like Heidegger wrote of nothingness as central to existence. The empty bench in mind is another version of this truth. Awareness is defined as much by its pauses as by its content. But emptiness frightens because it resists ownership. You cannot point to it and say, "This is mine." You cannot control it or decorate it. The bench remains, regardless of your will, and because it holds nothing, you wonder whether you vanish when you sit there. Without thoughts, without identity, without story, who are you? The pause feels like disappearance, but perhaps that is its gift. In sitting on the bench, you discover that you are not the content of consciousness. You are the awareness itself. And what about memory? It clutters rooms, fills corridors, but memory cannot reach the bench. When you sit, the past dissolves, future planning vanishes, only presence remains. The bench is untouched by time. It offers a seat in the eternal now, free from the weight of yesterday or tomorrow. Few linger because time's pull is strong, but if you do, you realize time itself was only furniture cluttering the room. The bench waits beneath it all. Even suffering softens here. Pain demands attention, filling the house with noise. But sit long enough on the bench, and you see pain flicker. It comes and goes. It cannot hold the emptiness. The space swallows it, reveals its impermanence. Joy, too, flickers. The bench does not cling. It holds nothing. And in holding nothing, it reveals the truth that nothing was ever permanent, nothing ever owned. There is also beauty in the bench's ordinariness. It is not a throne, not an altar, not a decorated seat. It is plain, simple, unadorned. Consciousness does not need grandeur to reveal itself. The simplest pause, the quietest breath, the barest awareness, these are enough. The empty bench is the heart of the house, waiting always, ignored often, but essential. Imagine now sitting there yourself. You set aside your stories, your plans, your regrets. You lower yourself gently, noticing how the bench supports you without condition. Around you, the room is silent. No furniture, no corridors, no mirrors, only space. At first, unease stirs. You want to move, to fill the emptiness. But stay, listen. Notice how, in the absence of content, presence shines brighter. You are not disappearing. You are arriving. The bench holds you not as a person, not as an identity, but as awareness itself, empty, open, infinite. Tonight, as you rest, let yourself sit on this inner bench. Notice the urge to rise, to flee into noise, resist it. Stay. Feel the silence deepen. Watch as thoughts drift by without landing. Let the emptiness open around you. For in the chamber of your own mind, the empty bench is not void. It is the clearest seat you will ever take. The place where consciousness reveals itself, unadorned, unclaimed, yet utterly real. Every house has thresholds, places where one room gives way to another, where you pause for just a moment before crossing. In consciousness, thresholds appear too, but they are not between rooms of stone or wood. They are between selves, between versions of who you believe you are. Each threshold offers the illusion that one self ends and another begins, yet when you step closer, the line wavers, the boundary blurs. The thresholds reveal not solid divisions but shifting illusions, each dissolving as you try to hold them. Think about the selves you have carried. The child who once played, the teenager who once doubted, the adult who once believed certain things. Each feels distinct, like rooms in a long hallway. But where is the threshold between them? Can you point to the moment childhood ended and adulthood began? Was there a single step, a single door, or was it a gradual crossing, so seamless that no boundary truly existed? The threshold you imagine is an illusion, useful for telling stories, but nowhere to be found in experience. Psychology acknowledges this too. Developmental stages are drawn like maps: infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood. But ask scientists for the exact border, and they hesitate. The changes are gradual, continuous, impossible to mark with certainty. Consciousness insists on thresholds because they give comfort, the sense of progress. Yet each threshold melts upon inspection. You are always in between, never fully one self or another, always crossing into illusions that pretend to be real. Even daily life reveals this truth. You wake in the morning, believing you are the same person who slept. But in those hours, your mind traveled through dreams, reshaped itself, forgotten voices stirred, memories rearranged. The self who wakes is not the same as the self who closed their eyes. Yet you smooth over the threshold, convincing yourself of continuity. You need the illusion, for without it, identity would scatter. But the threshold remains fragile, always waiting to reveal its emptiness. Dreams make the illusion visible. In dreams, you often shift from one self to another without question. You are yourself one moment, then a stranger the next. You inhabit bodies you have never known, speak in voices not your own, and when you wake, you slip back into your waking identity, as though crossing another threshold. Each shift feels seamless, natural, unquestioned. Dreams remind you that selves are costumes, exchanged without effort, each threshold a curtain rather than a wall. Philosophy has always circled this mystery. David Hume famously declared that when he searched for a self, he found only impressions, never an owner. Buddhism goes further, teaching that the self is an illusion, a series of aggregates, thoughts, sensations, memories, stitched together by habit. Each threshold between selves is only a trick of continuity. There is no permanent eye crossing from room to room. There are only shifting appearances, dissolving as soon as you look too closely. And yet, the illusion persists, because it serves. Without thresholds, life would feel unmoored. You could not say, "I have changed." without believing in some border crossed. You could not say, I am not who I was, without imagining a line between then and now. Thresholds give you narrative. They make the house of consciousness navigable, even if the lines they draw are imaginary. Consider how relationships expose thresholds. You meet someone new, and suddenly you behave differently, speak differently, even think differently. A new self emerges, as if stepping across a doorframe into another room. Later, when the relationship changes or ends, you step back or into another self altogether. Which one is real? Which one is illusion? The truth is both, and neither. Each threshold reveals a self, but no self remains permanent. You are always in passage, always between. Time, too, insists on thresholds. Birth and death, beginnings and endings, marked as clear lines. But are they? Birth is a gradual process. Cells dividing, organs forming, a child growing. Death is just as gradual, the body slowing, awareness dimming, silence deepening. Thresholds give the illusion of sharpness, yet both are processes, not lines. The self who is born is not one, but many. The self who dies dissolves, not in a moment, but across time. The threshold is a story, not a reality. And yet, there is a strange freedom in recognizing this. If thresholds are illusions, then the selves they separate are illusions too. You are not bound to any one identity. You are not trapped in a single room. You are fluid, shifting, always in between. To cling to oneself is to cling to a mirage. To see the threshold clearly is to realize you are not any of the selves at all. You are the space through which they pass, the house itself, not the tenants. Imagine standing at such a threshold now. On one side, the self you were yesterday, filled with certain memories and moods. On the other, the self you will become tomorrow, shaped by new experiences. You hover between them, belonging to neither. And in that hovering, you glimpse the truth. There is no fixed you. There is only crossing, endlessly, from one illusion to the next. Tonight, as you rest, notice the thresholds in your own awareness. Notice how you shift from waking to dreaming, from thought to silence, from one mood to another. Notice how no border is sharp, how every line blurs. Let yourself soften into this truth. You are not the selves you cross into. You are the threshold itself, the space of passage, the openness between illusions, the silent witness through which every version of you appears and dissolves. Every house has a vault, a space meant to protect what is precious, a chamber built to keep things safe. In the house of consciousness, there is such a vault too, but it does not guard gold or jewels. It holds something more fragile, more elusive, time. Yet the strange thing about this vault is that it cannot keep anything. The moment you place time inside it, it vanishes. Hours, days, years, everything you lock away dissolves, leaving only absence. This is the vault of vanishing time. Think of how often you try to hold time. You save photos, write diaries, keep calendars. You say, this moment will be remembered. This hour will not be lost. But no matter how tightly you clutch it, the moment slips through your hands, the diary fades, the photo ages, even the memory changes, rewriting itself each time you recall it. The vault betrays you. Instead of preserving, it erases. What you thought you had kept safe was already vanishing, the moment you placed it inside. Science confirms this betrayal. Neuroscience shows that memory is not a perfect archive, but a reconstruction, fragile and fluid. Each recall destabilizes, altering what was once stored. The vault rewrites itself even as you try to seal it. Cognitive psychology demonstrates that entire years can vanish from recall, leaving you with only fragments. The brain insists you lived them, but the vault holds only dust. Time vanishes not because you failed to keep it, but because time itself refuses to be kept. Philosophy has always felt the sting of this vanishing. Augustine wrote of time as a mystery, admitting that, while everyone knows what it is, no one can explain it. He divided it into past, present and future, only to realize the past no longer exists, the future does not yet exist, and the present slips away before it can be named. The vault of time holds nothing. Each moment vanishes before you can place it on the shelf. Consciousness pretends the vault is full, but in truth, it is always empty. And yet, you live as though time were solid. You chase it, save it, waste it, manage it. You mark your life by it. Birthdays, anniversaries, deadlines. But look honestly, where are those years you already lived? Where are the mornings of your childhood? the nights of your adolescence. You can recall fragments, but not the hours themselves. They vanished into the vault. They are gone. You cannot open a door and step into them. You can only wander the echo of memory. Time pretends to accumulate, but it dissolves the moment you look for it. Dreams expose this even more clearly. In dreams, time unravels completely. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours collapse into seconds. You wake convinced that a long journey has occurred, only to find minutes have passed. Dreams remind you that time was never stable. It bends, folds, dissolves. The vault never held it securely. Consciousness only pretends continuity, stringing fragments together to give you the illusion of flow. And yet, the paradox remains. Though time vanishes, it shapes everything. You age, your body changes, moments slip away, and still you cling to the illusion of continuity. Perhaps this is the essence of consciousness, to live inside a vault that holds nothing, yet to believe it is filled. The vanishing itself becomes the architecture of experience. Without it, life would not move, meaning would not form, stories could not unfold. Time must vanish for life to feel alive. But notice too, how time sometimes softens. A single moment can stretch infinitely. A kiss, a sunset, a breath before danger. Other times, hours vanish unnoticed, lost to distraction or repetition. The vault leaks differently each day. Some moments carve themselves into memory, etched so deeply they never fade. Others vanish as if they never happened at all. Consciousness is not fair in its preservation. It chooses without your consent, locking some fragments while discarding the rest. Consider identity through this lens. Who you are is nothing more than vanishing time stitched together by story. You claim continuity. I was this child, this teenager, this adult. But in truth, most of those hours are gone. You recall fragments, fill in blanks, invent narratives. The self is not preserved in the vault. It is rewritten each time you recall it. Your identity is not stable treasure. It is vanishing dust, arranged temporarily into shape, always dissolving again. This realization can feel unsettling. If time vanishes so completely, what remains? If the vault is empty, what holds meaning? Yet perhaps the answer lies in noticing the impermanence itself. Time's vanishing is not a flaw, but a gift. Because it vanishes, you cherish what appears. Because it slips away, you notice it at all. If every moment stayed, life would drown in clutter. The vault empties itself, so you can feel the fleetingness of now, so you can live inside the only thing that ever truly exists, the present. And death? The great erasure, the final vanishing. You fear it because it seems absolute, the end of all time. But in truth, time has always been vanishing. Every second you lived disappeared into the vault, leaving only echoes. Death is not new. It is only the final continuation of what you already know. Time never stays. Perhaps consciousness itself is not erased with it, but freed, released from the endless illusion of accumulation. The vault closes, but the house remains. Tonight as you drift, notice the vanishing. Notice how each thought fades, each sound disappears, each breath dissolves. Watch as the vault swallows them, leaving only silence. Do not resist. Do not mourn. The vanishing is the essence of time, and through it, you glimpse what lies beyond. Consciousness was never the keeper of hours. It was always the space where hours dissolve. The vault is empty, and in its emptiness lies the truest truth. Time was never yours to hold. Every house contains bridges of some kind. Archways, steps, beams that connect one part of the structure to another. In the house of consciousness, bridges exist too, but they do not connect places in the ordinary sense. They cross into silence. They span the noisy rooms of thought, the echoing chambers of memory, the corridors of dream, and carry you into a space beyond them all. The strange thing is that these bridges never seem to end in a bustling place. They always end in quiet, in stillness, in silence, so vast it feels both terrifying and freeing. Think of how often your mind builds such bridges. A thought begins, rises, and then fades. In that fading, a gap appears, and the bridge carries you across. You find yourself pausing, hovering between words, drifting into silence. Most of the time, you rush past it, filling it with another thought, another echo, another sound. But if you linger, you notice the bridge more clearly. It is not just a gap, it is a crossing into something deeper, a silence that holds everything without needing to say anything. Meditation traditions emphasize these bridges constantly. Focus on the breath, and you notice the silence after exhalation. Focus on sound, and you notice the quiet that follows its fading. The practice is not about clinging to thought, but about recognizing the crossings. Each bridge carries you from noise into stillness, from motion into rest. The silence is not absence. It is the foundation waiting beyond the clutter of awareness. The bridges remind you that silence is never far, always accessible through the fading of sound. Dreams often reveal these bridges in startling ways. You might dream of walking across a literal bridge, a suspension bridge, a narrow stone path, a fragile ropeway. You cross it with urgency, convinced something waits on the other side. But when you arrive, there is nothing. Only quiet, emptiness, sometimes a blank landscape. The dream unsettles you because you expect arrival. But in truth, the dream is showing you what waking life hides. Every bridge in consciousness leads not to a new crowd of thoughts, but to silence itself. The destination is always quiet. Philosophers, too, have sensed these bridges. Wittgenstein wrote that the purpose of philosophy is to climb a ladder of propositions and then throw it away, leaving only silence. Mystics across traditions speak of the via negativa, a path of stripping away words, concepts, identities, until nothing remains but the silent ground. These teachings remind you that the bridges of thought, though endless in their beginnings, always point beyond themselves. Their true direction is into silence, even if you rarely follow them far enough to notice. Consider how relationships contain these bridges. You speak with someone you love, words flow, laughter arises, emotions echo, but then comes a pause, a quiet glance, a shared silence. The bridge has carried you beyond noise into presence, where nothing needs to be said. In that silence, the bond feels deeper than any words could express. The bridge did not end in more chatter. It ended in stillness, where connection revealed itself most clearly. Even science hints at this truth. Neuroscientists studying brain activity during moments of insight or deep rest find that the networks of noise, quiet, synchrony increases, and silence emerges at the neural level. The brain itself seems to cross bridges from constant chatter into moments of stillness. These crossings are not failures of cognition, but essential resets, allowing new patterns to form. Silence is not absence of function. It is the ground from which function renews. And yet, silence frightens many. You cling to noise because it reassures. Thoughts make you feel alive. Voices prove you exist. Silence, in contrast, feels like absence, like death. That is why you avoid the bridges. You stop halfway, rush back into noise. But what if silence is not annihilation but truth? What if the bridges are not traps, but gifts? They carry you where you most need to go. Not into loss, but into the fullness of stillness that underlies everything. Notice how music depends on silence. Without pauses, notes blur into chaos. It is the rests that give shape, that create rhythm, that make melody possible. Consciousness works the same. The bridges of silence give structure to awareness. Without them, thought would be unbearable noise, memory endless clutter, perception overwhelming flood. The silence allows space. It gives meaning to the sound. The bridges are not interruptions. They are the very essence of order. And what about death? The greatest bridge of all. Life fills with noise, voices, stories, movements. But death, when it comes, is silence. You fear it because you imagine silence as emptiness. But perhaps it is not loss. Perhaps it is the final crossing. The longest bridge into the silence that was always here. But the smaller bridges of daily life, between breaths, between thoughts, between words or rehearsals, reminders of that greater crossing. Death does not erase. It completes the journey into the silence you have crossed into countless times already. Tonight, as you rest, notice the bridges. Notice how every fading thought is a crossing. Notice how every pause is an entryway. When silence comes, do not rush to fill it. Walk the bridge. Feel how it carries you from the noise of mind into the vastness beneath. Do not fear it. The silence will not harm you. It will hold you. It will remind you that you are not the voices, not the echoes, not the chatter. You are the space into which they vanish. So let the bridges stand. Let them carry you again and again into silence. For in silence lies the deepest truth of consciousness. Not person, not thought, not story, but stillness itself, endless, infinite, unbroken. The bridges do not lead away from life. They lead you into the heart of it, across into the silence that was always there, waiting, beneath every sound. Every house has staircases. ways to move between levels, to climb upward or descend below. In the house of consciousness, staircases appear constantly, but they rarely lead where you expect. Some spiral downward forever, never reaching a basement, never arriving at ground. These are staircases descending without end. You step onto them thinking you will reach some foundation, some bottom, but each turn only reveals another, and another. Consciousness itself becomes the endless descent, a spiral that never stops, a fall without landing. Think of how questions work. You ask, why am I this way? The answer seems within reach, but it immediately spawns another, and why that? You descend. Soon, another question follows. But what lies behind even that? The staircase continues. Philosophy calls this infinite regress, the problem of explanations that never arrive at a final ground. Every answer reveals another layer to explain, another reason to chase. You never reach bedrock. You only keep walking down. Consciousness is this infinite regress embodied, a staircase whose very structure is descent. Dreams expose the staircase clearly. You may dream of descending into cellars, subways, caverns, each deeper than the last. You never reach the end. You always find more stairs. Sometimes dread accompanies the descent, as though something waits below. Other times fascination drives you deeper, but the ending never arrives. The dream shows what waking thought disguises. The descent never stops. You live inside staircases that promise foundations but only multiply into more. Science, too, hints at this bottomlessness. Neuroscience tries to locate the source of consciousness in the brain. Neurons, networks, circuits. But every discovery demands another question. If neurons generate awareness, what generates the neurons firing? If circuits create thought, what created the circuits? Each explanation descends further. There is no final "this is where it begins." The staircase only extends deeper and deeper, refusing to end. Identity works the same. You believe you can uncover a core self if you descend far enough. I am my memories. But where do memories come from? I am my choices. But what shaped those choices? I am my body. But what animates the body? Each answer slides downward into another. The staircase never lands. The true self hides further below, always postponed, always deeper, always out of reach. You are not standing on a solid floor, you are walking stairs that never stop. Philosophers have long admitted this. Aristotle warned of infinite regress as a logical problem, yet offered no escape except to invoke first causes. Modern thinkers still debate whether there is a ground or whether the regress is unavoidable. Mystics, however, embrace it. They suggest the descent itself is the truth. There is no flaw because there is no need for one. The staircase is the experience, the spiral the revelation. Consciousness is not meant to end. It is meant to descend forever. And what about time? Imagine following time backward. Today becomes yesterday. Yesterday becomes last year. Last year becomes centuries ago. Keep descending. Where does it end? Science pushes back, Big Bang, cosmic origins. But even that begs another question. What came before? The staircase lengthens. Time itself refuses a bottom. You can descend forever, and still no end appears. Consciousness mirrors this. Always walking down, always asking, never arriving. This endless descent can feel suffocating. You want foundation, certainty, a final resting place. The staircase denies you that comfort. But notice also how it frees you. If no bottom exists, then you are not trapped. You cannot fail to arrive, if arrival itself is impossible. The descent becomes its own form of freedom. You are no longer tasked with finding the end. You are free to explore endlessly. Each step another revelation, each turn another layer of awareness. Imagine walking such a staircase now. The walls narrow, shadows lengthen, steps creak beneath your feet. You descend expecting a basement, a foundation, but it never comes. Instead, each turn opens into more stairs, more descent. At first, anxiety rises, but then, a shift occurs. You stop demanding an end. You let the descent itself become the experience. Suddenly, the infinite regress is no longer a curse. It is liberation, an acceptance that consciousness was never a structure with foundations. It was always a spiral of endless descent. Even suffering follows this pattern. Pain descends into memory, which descends into fear, which descends into meaning. Each layer deepens the experience. Joy too descends, one pleasure leading into gratitude, gratitude into love, love into wonder. The staircase holds everything, not to trap you but to deepen you. Each descent adds depth, complexity, richness. The absence of an end is not failure, but abundance. Without it, experience would be flat, shallow, unbearably simple. And death, you may imagine death as the landing at the bottom of the stairs, but perhaps not. Perhaps death is only another turn, another step down, another descent into silence. The staircase does not end. It simply continues in ways you cannot yet imagine. The fear comes from believing an end must exist. But what if there never was one? What if the descent is eternal, and what you call death is only another layer, another level, another spiral below? Tonight, as you rest, notice the staircases within your own awareness. Notice how each thought descends into another, how each question leads deeper, how each answer only extends the staircase further. Instead of resisting, allow yourself to walk. Let the steps carry you down. Do not fear the absence of ground. The descent itself is the truth. The spiral itself is the revelation. Consciousness does not promise arrival. It promises endless depth. So descend without fear. Walk the staircases of your mind. Let them lead you deeper and deeper, knowing there is no basement, no bottom, no end. For the house of consciousness is not built on foundations. It is built on staircases descending forever. Spirals without conclusion. Steps that never stop. And in that endless descent lies the paradoxical comfort. You were never meant to arrive. You were always meant to walk. Every great house has an atrium, a central opening where light pours in, where space seems grander than the rest, where visitors gather and voices echo. In the house of consciousness, there is an atrium too, but it is hollow. It looks impressive at first. Tall ceilings, wide expanse, echoes multiplying against invisible walls. You step inside and feel as though you've reached the center, the very core of self. But when you listen carefully, when you search for substance, you realize the atrium is empty. The echoes are not proof of presence. They are proof of hollowness. This is the hollow atrium of identity. From childhood, you are taught to fill this space. You are given names, roles, expectations. You declare, "This is me." Each label feels like a stone placed into the atrium, making it more solid. But look again, years later, and the stones have shifted. What once defined you no longer fits. A belief once cherished becomes foreign. A role once central dissolves. The atrium empties itself again and again, leaving you with echoes where you thought there would be walls. Psychology describes this as the narrative self, the ongoing story you tell to explain who you are. The atrium feels full only when the story echoes convincingly. Yet stories change, memories fade, interpretations shift, entire chapters vanish. Neuroscience reveals there is no single self-center in the brain, no permanent core generating identity. Instead, countless regions coordinate, producing the illusion of solidity. The atrium feels grand, but the architecture is scaffolding, not stone. Beneath the echoes lies emptiness. Dreams make this hollowness vivid. You dream of yourself, but act as someone else. You switch roles mid-scene, inhabiting identities that dissolve when you wake. Sometimes you cannot even find yourself in the dream at all. Events unfold without a clear protagonist. The atrium in dreams reveals itself as hollow, its grandeur, nothing more than shifting appearances. Waking life disguises this emptiness more carefully, but it is no less real. The identity you cling to is just another echo in the atrium, convincing because it reverberates, hollow because nothing stands behind it. Philosophers and mystics have always warned of this emptiness. Hume admitted he could never find a self, only a bundle of impressions. Buddhism teaches in Atatta, no self. As the core truth, identity is an illusion, hollow at its heart. Even modern thinkers echo this. Derek Parfit argued that personal identity is not what matters. Continuity is an illusion. Survival is psychological, and the self is nothing more than patterns. All these voices point to the same conclusion. The atrium is not solid, it is empty space, dressed up as center. And yet, paradoxically, the hollowness does not make the atrium useless. Its emptiness is what allows light to pour in, what allows echoes to reverberate, what allows gatherings to happen. In the same way, the hollow nature of identity is what allows you to adapt, to change, to grow. If the self were solid stone, you could never shift. You would be trapped in a single shape. Because it is hollow, you can evolve endlessly. The emptiness is not flaw but freedom. Still, many fear this realization. To admit the atrium is hollow feels like admitting you are nothing. You cling harder to labels, achievements, stories, trying to fill the space with permanence, but the echoes never stop. They remind you that identity cannot be held forever, and perhaps this is the lesson. You are not the atrium itself, not the echoes within. You are the awareness of the space, the openness that holds it all, hollow yet luminous. Consider relationships through this lens. You present different selves to different people: child, friend, parent, lover. Each role fills the atrium temporarily, convincing you it is solid. But when the relationship shifts or ends, the role dissolves, leaving emptiness again. You grieve not just the loss of the other, but the loss of the self you were with them. The atrium hollows once more. And yet, this cycle repeats. New roles fill the space, new echoes resound. The emptiness is constant, but it is never barren. It allows endless creation. Even time deepens the hollowness. The self of yesterday no longer fits today's story. Tomorrow will rewrite today. You cannot carry all versions of yourself at once. The atrium cannot be permanently filled. Each version comes and goes, leaving its echoes. Identity is not a core, but a performance in an open hall, echoing for a while before fading into silence. Imagine standing in this hollow atrium now. You hear echoes of every role you've ever played. Child, dreamer, worker, lover, seeker. They overlap, reverberating against the invisible walls. For a moment, it feels overwhelming, as though you should be able to gather them, unify them, declare one as the real you. But then you realize, none of them endure, none define you. They are all temporary voices in a space that remains hollow, open, free. The atrium itself is not diminished by their fading, it is revealed by it. Tonight as you rest, notice the atrium within. Notice the echoes of your own story, how they bounce, overlap, fade. Do not fear the hollowness. It does not erase you, it reveals you. For you are not the echoes, you are the vastness that allows them. You are the hollow space where identity arises and dissolves, and in that realization lies freedom. You do not need to cling to being anyone at all. You are already the openness beneath, silent, luminous, eternal. Every city is held together by its streets, lines connecting homes, markets and squares. In the house of consciousness, there are streets too, but they are not built from stone or asphalt. They are built on memory. Each memory becomes a paving stone, each recollection another turn, another intersection. Walk long enough, and you realize your entire inner city is constructed from memories, fragile, shifting, endlessly rewritten. The streets feel permanent, but they are not. They are maps drawn on water, convincing only because you keep walking them. Think of how you navigate your own life. You orient yourself with memory. I grew up here, I worked there, I loved this person, I lost that one. Each fact becomes a street you walk again and again. Memory provides direction. Without it you would be lost. But the problem is this: memory is not reliable stone. It is unstable clay. The streets you think are fixed, crack, warp, even vanish, leaving you wandering paths that were never solid to begin with. Neuroscience has shown this clearly. Memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Each recall alters the trace, reshaping the past to fit the present. What you believe to be fixed paving stones are laid anew each time you step on them. The more you revisit a memory, the more it changes. The street you walk today is not the same one you walked yesterday. The city is rebuilt constantly, even as you believe it endures. Psychology demonstrates the fragility further. False memories arise easily, convincing you of events that never happened. Suggestion, repetition, even imagination can construct entire streets that feel as real as any other, and yet they were never paved. You walk confidently, never realizing the ground beneath you is air. Consciousness provides the illusion of solidity, but the streets of memory are as unstable as sand shifting beneath your feet. Dreams expose this instability in haunting ways. In dreams, streets shift without warning. You walk toward a familiar corner, only to find it leads somewhere else. Places from your childhood merge with places you have never been. And yet, in the dream, it feels natural. The streets are built from fragments of memory rearranged, recombined, reconstructed. Waking life is no different, though it hides the instability better. The streets you trust are just as fluid, just as vulnerable to collapse. Philosophy has long questioned the authority of memory. Nietzsche warned that too much memory chains us to the past, making us unable to live in the present. Hume argued that identity itself is nothing more than memory's illusion, stitching together impressions into a story of continuity. Without memory, the self dissolves, but with memory, the self deceives. Either way, the streets built on memory are fragile, illusory, temporary. And yet, paradoxically, they are essential. Without these streets, you would have no direction at all. Memory may be fragile, but it gives you a sense of home. It tells you who you are, even if the story shifts. It connects today to yesterday, this self to that one, weaving continuity out of fragments. The streets may be unstable, but they are still the only way you know how to navigate the city of consciousness. Consider how trauma reshapes the streets. A single painful event becomes a central road, dominating the map. Every path seems to intersect with it. Every journey passes through it. Healing means slowly rerouting, building new paths, softening the dominance of the old one. Yet even then, the memory remains, a landmark you can never fully erase. The street is always there, though perhaps overgrown, less traveled, hidden behind newer roads. Joy, too, leaves its imprint. A day of laughter with a friend, a moment of love, a sense of triumph. These become bright avenues, lined with light, streets you return to willingly. They may fade, but their trace remains, guiding you back when the city feels dark. The streets built on memory shape, not just your map, but your mood, determining how you wander, where you linger, what you avoid. But notice the deeper paradox. Every memory is already gone. The moment it captures has vanished. What you call memory is not preservation, but recreation. You walk streets built on absence, convinced they are solid. Each step is a step on nothing, and yet you keep walking, because the illusion is all you have. Consciousness provides no alternative map. The streets may vanish, but without them you cannot navigate at all. Imagine walking these streets tonight. You wander past intersections of childhood, avenues of loss, alleys of forgotten dreams. Some stones are cracked, some freshly laid, some dissolving. Even as you step, you realize the city is never complete, never fixed. It is built anew each moment, a construction of memory laid across emptiness. The streets are useful, but they are not true, and perhaps that is enough. For memory was never meant to preserve forever. It was meant to guide you through impermanence. The streets are illusions, but they help you walk. They give you direction. Even if the city changes with every step, you may never find stability, but you can still find orientation. The streets are not permanent, but they are pathways through the endless house of consciousness, leading you deeper into the truth that nothing was ever solid, nothing ever fixed. So tonight, as you rest, notice the streets you walk in your mind. Notice how some shine brightly, others crack beneath your feet. Notice how none remain unchanged. Do not cling to them. Do not mourn when they dissolve. They were never meant to endure. They were only meant to guide you for a time. Consciousness is not the city. It is the space in which the streets appear, vanish, and reappear. And in that space lies the freedom to keep walking, even when the roads are gone. Every city has towers, structures built to rise above the rest, to declare presence, to symbolize strength. In the house of consciousness, you also find towers, but unlike ordinary ones, these towers lack a center. They rise high, seemingly impressive, yet inside they are hollow, spiraling upward without core support. From a distance they look solid, but when you step inside, you realize there is no central pillar holding them together. This is the paradox of consciousness. The tower of self stands tall, yet no center can ever be found. Think of how identity feels. You believe there is a core you at the center, something stable, permanent, a foundation. But when you search for it, you only find layers, a personality trait, a memory, a belief, a desire. You peel one away, expecting to reach the core, but beneath it lies only another layer, and another. Eventually, you discover there is no central stone. The tower is built around emptiness. Psychology confirms this. The self is described as a construct, an emergent property of processes. There is no single region of the brain where you reside. Instead, countless networks interact, producing the illusion of centrality. Like bricks arranged around a hollow, they give the impression of solidity, but remove any one piece, and the whole pattern shifts. The tower stands, but its center is air. Dreams make this clear. In dreams, you often change without question. New bodies, new faces, new roles. You accept each one as you, even though they contradict. How can all of them be your center? They cannot. The dream shows what waking life hides. Identity is flexible, centerless, adaptable. The tower rises, but it has no permanent core. You are convinced of centrality only because you need it to feel stable. Philosophers have long struggled with this absence. Hume declared that the self is nothing more than a bundle of perceptions, no unifying center to bind them. Buddhism echoed this with anatta, the doctrine of no self. Even modern thinkers like Parfit suggest personal identity is not a fixed center, but a chain of psychological connections, loose and shifting. All point to the same conclusion: the tower of identity has no foundation stone, no central column. And yet, the illusion of a center is powerful. It allows you to function. You say, I am this person. I choose. I decide. Without this belief, daily life would feel unstable. The tower must appear solid, even if its inside is hollow. But the danger comes when you cling to the illusion too tightly. When life shakes you through loss, change, or crisis, the hollowness is revealed, and fear rises. You wonder, who am I really? You search desperately for a core, only to find absence. But absence need not be terrifying. It can be liberating. If there is no center, then you are not trapped. You are not bound to a single version of self. You are free to shift, to change, to evolve. The hollowness is not failure, but possibility. The tower without a center is not weak. It is flexible, resilient, always able to adapt because it has no rigid foundation. Think of relationships. With each person you reveal a different side. Friend, partner, child, mentor. Which one is your true self? None. All are bricks arranged around a hollow, reflections shifting with context. This is not deceit. It is the nature of consciousness. You are not one fixed self. You are many selves, none central, all temporary. The tower rises not from a core, but from the space that allows infinite arrangement. Even time deepens this truth. The self you were a decade ago is not the self you are now. Different memories, beliefs, habits, even desires. If there were a permanent center, it should have remained unchanged. But nothing remains. The tower stands only because new bricks replace old ones, new patterns form. The hollowness is what makes continuity possible. Without emptiness at the center, change could not occur. Imagine walking into such a tower. From outside, it looks imposing. Inside, you expect to find a throne, a pillar, a sacred stone at its heart. But as you walk deeper, you find only air. Light pours in from windows, shadows dance across the walls, echoes swirl in the hollow. At first, the emptiness unsettles you. But then, something shifts. You realize the emptiness is what gives the tower its presence. The hollowness is not absence. It is the space through which light moves, sound reverberates, life flows. Neuroscience mirrors this vision. Brain imaging shows activity distributed, decentralized, emergent. There is no self-center lighting up. Instead, processes synchronize temporarily, then dissolve. The sense of a core I is a narrative, useful but fictional. Consciousness is a tower with no stone heart, a structure built around absence, and yet it stands, and yet it holds. Tonight, as you rest, imagine yourself standing in this hollow atrium. Feel the echoes of identity swirling. Hear the stories you tell about yourself bouncing against the walls. Notice how convincing they are, and yet how empty the center remains. Do not fear it. Do not rush to fill it. The hollowness is not a flaw. It is the essence of what you are. So let the tower remain hollow. Let it rise without a center. Let it remind you that you are not a solid core, but a pattern, a presence, a play of echoes. Consciousness does not need a foundation stone. It stands because of its emptiness, not despite it. And in realizing this, you may discover the deepest paradox of all. You are not the tower. You are the space within it. Vast, silent, endless. Not every corner of the house of consciousness is dark, hollow, or echoing. Somewhere inside, hidden behind layers of noise and corridors of confusion, there is a garden. You may stumble into it by accident, a sudden calm in the middle of turmoil, a quiet insight in the chaos of thought. This garden is not outside you. It grows within thought itself. At first glance, it seems impossible. How can something fertile, alive, and serene bloom inside the restless chatter of the mind? And yet, it does. This is the garden hidden inside thought. Think of how certain ideas arrive. They begin like seeds, small and unnoticed. A stray phrase, a remembered line of poetry, a question that lingers after conversation. You do not plant them deliberately. They drift in, settle, and over time they grow. One day, When you are quiet enough, you notice the bloom, a realization blossoms, a clarity unfolds. You step into the hidden garden and realize thought itself can contain silence, beauty, and renewal. Philosophy describes such moments as insight. A paradox holds you for days, frustrating, circling, then suddenly, without warning, the answer blooms, not through deliberate effort, but through quiet ripening. Mystics describe similar gardens. Zen calls them kensho, sudden glimpses of awakening, moments where thought drops away and truth flowers. These gardens are not cultivated by force. They grow in hidden corners, nourished by stillness, revealed only when the noise thins. Psychology offers another view. The unconscious mind continues working long after conscious thought stops. Problems you abandon are solved later in flashes of clarity. Artists know this well. Inspiration arrives not in the act of forceful thinking, but in moments of pause, when the hidden garden reveals its flowers. Thought is not only noise. It also shelters seeds that grow in silence, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Dreams sometimes take you directly into the garden. You walk through landscapes lush and green, symbols of growth, of renewal, of hidden truths surfacing. You may wake with a sense of peace, as though something healed without explanation. The dream garden reminds you that consciousness is not barren. Beneath the corridors of illusion, something always grows. Thought may seem restless, but inside it hides fertility, waiting to reveal itself. Consider memory through this lens. You recall moments of joy, tenderness, love, moments that seemed ordinary at the time, but later bloom inside you. A smile from a stranger, a kind word from a parent, a gesture of care. These small seeds grow quietly over the years, until one day you realize how deeply they shaped you. The garden inside thought is made not just of ideas, but of remembered kindness, hidden until it blossoms again. But notice the paradox. The garden is hidden precisely because you search too hard. When you force thought, chase answers, or demand clarity, the soil hardens. Seeds cannot grow under pressure. Only when you soften, release, and allow, does the garden reveal itself. This is why insight often comes in showers, in dreams, in idle wandering. You cannot command the flowers. You can only prepare the soil and wait. Philosophers have hinted at this hidden growth. Socrates spoke of knowledge as recollection, something already planted within, waiting to be uncovered. Buddhist teachings remind us that enlightenment is not something to be gained, but recognized. It already blooms, unseen, inside thought. The hidden garden is not foreign. It is part of consciousness itself, obscured only by the noise you mistake for all that exists. And yet, the garden is fragile. Neglect it long enough, and weeds of worry, resentment, and distraction choke its soil. You fill the house with noise, and forget the quiet corners where growth occurs. The garden does not vanish, but it becomes harder to find. Silence, reflection, attention. These are the waters that keep it alive. Without them, you may wander the corridors of mind endlessly, never remembering the hidden place where clarity blooms. But the garden is resilient too. Even in the darkest seasons of thought, grief, despair, confusion, it waits. Seeds sprout in cracks, flowers bloom in silence you did not know you carried. A single breath of calm can reveal it again. A single moment of wonder at the sky, a sound, a memory can open the gate. You do not create the garden. You rediscover it. Imagine walking into it tonight. You step out of the noisy corridors, the echoing chambers, the hollow towers. The air softens. The ground feels gentle. Around you plants sway, flowers open, streams flow quietly. The garden is not decoration. It is consciousness showing you its hidden face. You breathe and realize the beauty was always here, waiting behind the noise. You needed only to pause to see it. And perhaps this is the deepest truth. Consciousness is not only chaos, illusion, and echo. It is also fertile, alive, capable of blooming. The hidden garden proves that awareness contains not just confusion, but clarity, not just noise, but silence, not just hollowness, but beauty. The paradox is not that the garden exists, but that you forget it so easily. You search everywhere, while all along it was growing inside thought itself. So tonight, as you rest, step into that hidden garden. Do not demand it appear. Simply soften, breathe, wait. The flowers will bloom, the clarity will rise, and in that moment, you will remember, consciousness is not just a maze, it is also a garden, endlessly blooming, hidden within the very thoughts you thought would never quiet. Every house has a room that feels abandoned. A place that seems built for someone yet remains empty. In the house of consciousness there is such a place too, but it is stranger than any empty room. It feels designed to hold someone, shaped like a chair awaiting its occupant, like a stage awaiting its actor, yet no one ever arrives. This is the place that holds no one. You search for the occupant endlessly. Surely there must be a true self somewhere. The person who owns the thoughts, who carries the memories, who directs the actions. Each time you look closer you expect to find them here, in this place. But what you discover instead is absence. Thoughts appear, yes, but without an owner. Memories return, yes, but without a keeper. Feelings surge, yes, but without a permanent feeler. The room remains empty. The chair remains unoccupied. Psychology reveals the same paradox. The sense of I is constructed, a narrative woven from countless impressions. When neuroscientists search the brain for a central seat of self, they find no throne. Instead, networks of activity light up in patterns, shifting constantly. The supposed occupant is only a story told after the fact, a character invented to explain the movements of the house. The place that seems to hold someone is in truth vacant. Dreams reveal this emptiness more vividly. You dream of yourself acting, speaking, running, but then your perspective shifts. Sometimes you see yourself from outside, as though you are both actor and audience. Other times you vanish altogether, watching events unfold without any sense of me inside them. The place where the dream self should sit is empty, and yet the dream continues. The story unfolds, awareness remains. The self is not required for the house to function. Philosophers have long peered into this room. Hume found no self when he looked inside, only a bundle of perceptions, each replacing the last. Buddhism goes further, teaching that the self is an illusion, that the empty place is not a flaw but the truth. Sartre described consciousness as a nothingness, a space defined not by what it contains but by its openness. In every case, the conclusion is the same. The place that seems to hold someone was never occupied, it was always empty. And yet, the illusion persists, because it comforts. You want someone to sit in the chair, to steer, to direct. You want to believe in a captain inside the ship of consciousness. Without it, you fear you are rudderless, meaningless, lost. But notice, the house still functions. Thoughts still arise. Choices still occur. Life continues, even without a central occupant. The place holds no one, yet the house does not collapse. This realization can feel unsettling, even terrifying. If no one is there, then who suffers? Who loves? Who dies? But look closer. Suffering arises, yes, but it is not owned. Love flows, yes, but it is not contained. Even death, when it comes, is not the erasure of a permanent self, but the dissolution of patterns, the emptying of a place that was never filled. The absence of an occupant does not mean absence of experience. It means experience itself is the reality, not the imagined owner. Relationships expose this paradox beautifully. You say, I love you, but who is the I? Search for it, and you find only a flow of feelings, words, actions. The place that seems to hold the lover is empty, yet the love is real. You say, I am hurt, but who is the I? Look closely, and you find only sensations, memories, emotions passing through. The place remains vacant, yet the pain still feels vivid. The emptiness does not erase the experience. It reveals that experience itself is primary. Even time echoes this emptiness. The self of yesterday is gone. The self of tomorrow has not yet arrived. Only this moment appears, and even now, if you search, you do not find a permanent I. You find only awareness, unfolding. The place remains empty, yet life continues moving. Consciousness does not require an occupant to function. It never did. Imagine walking into this room tonight. At first you feel uneasy. The chair looks important, sacred, as though it should be filled. You expect someone to appear, but when no one comes, you notice something else. The room is peaceful. The emptiness is not frightening. It is spacious. Without an occupant, there is freedom. Without a center, there is openness. The place that holds no one is not barren. It is vast, silent, limitless. Science, too, points in this direction. The brain generates the sense of self after action, narrating decisions as though someone chose them. But experiments reveal the choice often happens before the I claims it. The supposed occupant arrives late, inventing stories. The room was always empty. The illusion of presence is created by echoes, not by a permanent resident. So tonight, as you drift, allow yourself to step fully into this place. See the chair, see its emptiness. Do not rush to fill it. Do not panic when no one appears. Let it remain vacant. Let the room reveal itself as it truly is. Not broken, not incomplete, but free of ownership. The place that holds no one is the heart of consciousness, the center that is centerless, the openness from which everything arises. And perhaps then you will understand the paradox. You were never the occupant. You were the room itself, the space that holds all appearances. The chair was always empty, and that emptiness was always enough. Every house has an edge. Its walls, its fences, the point where space ends and something else begins. In the house of consciousness, this edge exists too. But unlike stone or brick, it does not mark a clear division. Instead, it dissolves into silence. At the outermost boundary of awareness, when thought has run its course, when memory has faded, when even identity has thinned, what remains is silence. It is not silence as absence, but silence as presence, vast, unshaken, immeasurable. This is the silence at consciousness's edge. Think of how ordinary perception works. Each moment fills with sound, with image, with feeling, yet always, at the edges, silence waits, between notes of music, between words of speech, between thoughts of mind. Silence holds everything together. You rarely notice it, because the noise draws your attention. But if you lean close, you realize the edge is not sound at all. It is the stillness behind it, the silence from which all sound arises and to which it returns. Meditation traditions guide seekers here directly. They ask you to follow thought until it dissolves, to listen until sound fades, to breathe until the pause between breaths widens. At that edge, silence opens. Some call it emptiness, others call it presence. Either way, it reveals itself as the ground. The edge of consciousness is not more content, not more thought, but the cessation of it. The silence is what remains when everything else has been let go. Dreams sometimes carry you to this same edge. You dream of falling into vast fields of white, or of soundless landscapes, or of blank space where nothing moves. At first it feels unsettling, an absence where story should continue, but then a calm spreads. The dream has brought you to the edge, showing you what lies beneath the surface layers of mind. It is not chaos. It is not noise. It is silence, always waiting, always holding. Philosophy has circled this silence too. Wittgenstein ended his Tractatus with the line, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." He recognized that the edge of thought is silence, that beyond it, words collapse. Mystics from many traditions say the same. The Tao Te Ching begins by admitting that the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Silence is not failure. It is recognition that consciousness exceeds all expression. Science, in its own way, brushes against this edge. Neuroscientists describe the quieting of brain activity during deep states of meditation or flow. The networks of chatter still, synchrony increases, and a deep silence spreads through the mind. It is measurable, in rhythms, in waves, but the essence cannot be captured. Instruments can record less noise. They cannot capture the silence itself. The edge is not in the data. It is in the direct experience of awareness. And what about death? For many, death is imagined as the final silence, the cessation of voice, memory, thought. It frightens because it feels absolute. But perhaps death is not alien. Perhaps it is only the same silence that has always been present at the edge, waiting patiently beyond noise. You have already touched it in every pause, every gap, every moment of stillness. Death is only the longest return into the silence you already know. Notice how relationships also point here. You speak endlessly with those you love, filling the air with words. Yet sometimes, in the quiet of shared presence, silence speaks more than words ever could. A glance, a breath, a pause. These moments reveal the edge of language. The silence at the boundary is not empty. It is full of connection, deeper than noise. You realize then that silence is not absence, but intimacy itself. But silence at consciousness's edge is not easy to stay with. The mind resists. It wants to fill, to chatter, to decorate. Emptiness feels like loss, so you rush back into sound, into thought, into identity. The edge frightens because it strips everything away. Yet if you remain, if you let the noise dissolve, you realize silence is not annihilation. It is the ground you have been walking on all along. Imagine standing at this edge tonight. The corridors behind you echo with voices, the halls with memory, the staircases with questions. But now you step beyond them. The walls thin, the noise fades, the lights dim. Ahead, only silence. At first it feels vast and empty, like falling into nothing. But as you listen, you realize the silence is alive. It breathes, it holds, it expands. It is not nothingness. It is everything, revealed in stillness. And perhaps this is the final paradox. You search for meaning in words, in thoughts, in endless explanations, but the meaning was always here, at the edge, in the silence that contains all things. The edge is not a boundary, but an opening, a reminder that consciousness itself does not end in noise. It ends in silence, and that silence is not the end at all, it is the beginning. So tonight, as you rest, walk to the edge. Do not fear the quiet. Let the noise fade, the thoughts dissolve, the stories end. Step into the silence, and let it hold you. For at the edge of consciousness, there is no loss, no fear, no absence. There is only silence, vast, eternal, complete. And in that silence, you may finally realize, you were never the noise at all. You were always the silence waiting at the edge. Every journey through the house of consciousness eventually leads back to where it began. After corridors that fold, staircases that descend, gardens that bloom, and vaults that vanish, you return to the first room, the endless one. At first it may feel like failure, as though you have wandered in circles, but then you realize there was never anywhere else to go. The room was always here, vast, open, limitless. Every passage, every illusion, every echo, was only a detour within it. To return is not to repeat, but to recognize. You have been walking inside the endless room all along. Think of how thought cycles. You chase answers, only to find yourself asking the same questions again. You believe you have moved forward, but the path loops. Memory too spirals. Old recollections resurface, altered but familiar, guiding you back to patterns you thought abandoned. Even dreams repeat, symbols reappear, landscapes recycle, characters return. Everything bends back to the same room, the same awareness, the same vastness that contains it all. Consciousness does not progress like a line. It circles back, reminding you that there is no escape because there is no outside. Philosophy calls this the eternal return. Nietzsche described it as life repeating infinitely, each moment lived again and again. Buddhism speaks of samsara, the endless cycle of existence, rebirth upon rebirth. Neuroscience, in its way, shows the same brain networks loop, default patterns recur, thoughts spiral in cycles. Every discipline, every perspective, suggests that consciousness does not lead outwards. It leads back into itself, returning to the same vast room without walls. And yet, this return is not futile. Each time you come back, you see the room differently. The first time, it feels overwhelming, as though emptiness means nothingness. The second time, you notice its openness, its space. The third time, you recognize its familiarity. The fourth time, perhaps, you realize this endless room is not void. It is home. The return is not failure, but deepening. Each loop another layer of recognition, another glimpse of what was always here. Dreams often symbolize this return. You wander strange landscapes, only to find yourself back where you began. At first, you resist. How can the dream circle back so easily? But then you notice the return has changed you. You see the familiar space with new eyes. What was once ordinary becomes strange. What was once strange becomes ordinary. The return reveals not just the room, but the transformation that occurred within you while wandering. Consciousness itself works this way. You always return, but you are never the same. Relationships mirror this too. You meet people, drift apart, reunite. Even when the reunion feels familiar, you have changed. The return is not the same as the first encounter. Memory alters, emotions shift, perspectives deepen. The endless room of self holds each version of you, each version of others, allowing return without true repetition. The sameness and difference exist together, woven into the endlessness of awareness. And what of death? You fear it as an ending, a final departure from the house. But perhaps it is only another return. The noise of life fades, the corridors dissolve, and once more you find yourself in the endless room, silent, vast, without walls. It feels like the first time, yet it is also the last. The cycle completes, not by leaving, but by returning. Death may not erase consciousness. It may reveal its endlessness, stripping away illusions until only the vast room remains. Imagine walking into this room tonight. The doors behind you vanish. The staircases dissolve. The corridors collapse. All that remains is space. No boundaries, no divisions, no corners. At first, the openness frightens you. Where do you stand when there is no floor? Where do you go when there are no walls? But as you breathe, calm spreads. You realize you do not need a destination. You do not need furniture or markers. The room holds you simply by being endless, silent, infinite. Science cannot measure this room, but it brushes its edges. Studies of consciousness often reduce experience to neural patterns, yet even researchers admit something remains unexplained, an awareness that cannot be dissected, an openness that cannot be reduced. The endless room is that mystery, the presence that remains when all explanations fall away. You cannot find its walls, because it has none. You cannot exit because you were never outside. You can only return, again and again, until you realize you never left. This is why the endless room is paradoxical. It feels both empty and full, both familiar and alien, both comforting and unsettling. It resists every label because labels are walls, and the room has none. To return here is to confront the truth that consciousness is not a person, not a story, not even a thing. It is a place, vast, endless, silent, open. The room does not explain itself. It only reveals itself, each time you arrive. So tonight, as you drift, allow yourself to return. Do not search for exits. Do not demand meaning. Simply stand in the endless room, and let it surround you. Notice its silence, its openness, its absence of walls. Notice how, even without furniture, even without self, the room remains. It was here before you wandered. It will be here after you forget. It is here now, waiting, endless, unbroken. And perhaps then you will realize the final paradox. You never actually returned. You were always in the room. Every corridor, every stair, every garden was only another corner of the same vastness. To return is only to see clearly what was already true. Consciousness is not a journey toward something. It is the endless room itself, vast, silent, infinite, holding everything, belonging to no one, and never letting you leave, because you never left. You have wandered through corridors that loop, rooms that vanish, gardens blooming inside thought, staircases descending without end. You have seen windows looking nowhere, benches that float in emptiness, towers without centers, and spaces folding into illusions. Every step has been a reflection, every turn an echo, every shadow a reminder that consciousness does not travel in straight lines. It cycles, spirals, folds back upon itself. Now, as you stand in the awareness of having traversed all of it, the question arises, what have you learned from this journey? Perhaps the answer is simple, and perhaps it is elusive. It is not outside you. It is not in a place to find. It has always been here, within the room, within the self that may not even exist, within the silent space that holds all experience. Think about how you experienced each section, each corridor, each door, each map that erased itself. Each echo in empty halls was a test of perception. Did you notice the subtle shifts in familiarity? Did you sense the folds in time and memory? The patterns repeating under different guises, the spaces that seemed familiar yet unknown. Consciousness is both observer and observed. It is the room and the one who walks through it. By observing these illusions, by following the paths that wind backward, by acknowledging the thresholds between self and space, you have been participating in the creation of the endless room, even as you explored it. There is no external authority here, no guide beyond your own attention, and yet you are never truly alone. Every echo, every shadow, every reflection is a companion, a teacher, a mirror of the mind. As you return from this journey, consider the paradox of knowledge and ignorance. The more you explored, the more you understood that understanding is not accumulation but recognition. Recognizing the endless loops, recognizing the empty yet full spaces, recognizing that rooms can exist without owners, that staircases can descend infinitely, that gardens can bloom inside thought. All of this recognition does not grant mastery. It grants awareness. Awareness of cycles, of patterns, of the fragile architecture of perception. And with awareness comes a quiet understanding. You can never fully escape consciousness, but you can never be trapped, because the room was never a cage. The room is vast. It is open. It is infinite. And it exists because you exist. or perhaps because existence itself exists without you. Imagine now the silent corners, the thresholds between self and illusion. Perhaps you feel an emptiness, perhaps a subtle fear, perhaps a calm that is unfamiliar. All of these sensations are valid, because the room contains them. The room contains curiosity and doubt, memory and forgetfulness, presence and absence. Each return to the room is both repetition and novelty. Each reflection is both familiar and alien. This is the nature of consciousness. It is never static, never fully known, never completely revealed. The only constant is the return, the cycle that brings you back again and again to recognize what was always here. What does it mean then to return and to recognize? It means accepting that the self may be an illusion, or at least a provisional construct. It means understanding that thought is architecture, memory is building material, perception is the scaffolding upon which experience rests. It means knowing that corridors can fold, walls can dissolve, doors can open into voids or memories, and yet you are still here, still aware, still wandering. This wandering is not a failure, it is the fundamental state of consciousness. You are not meant to escape, but to experience. You are not meant to conquer the endless room, but to inhabit it fully, moment by moment, loop by loop. And as you inhabit it, notice the subtle beauty in this paradox. The room is endless, but it is also intimate. It is empty, yet full. It has no owner, yet it holds everything. Time drifts away, yet you can mark your steps in echoes and shadows. You may not remember all the paths you have taken, all the rooms you have seen, all the thresholds crossed, and yet the journey leaves traces, faint and delicate, like footprints in water. You may not find answers, but you find reflection. You may not find meaning, but you find recognition. You may not leave the room, but you understand it more fully, with each cycle, each loop, each return. Consider now the final subtlety. Even this conclusion is a room. Words are doors, sentences are corridors, paragraphs are staircases descending or ascending into silence. As you read, as you visualize, as you imagine, you are wandering again, circling, folding, returning. The conclusion is not an exit. It is a portal. It is an invitation to continue the journey inward, to experience the endless room in new ways, to notice the details that were previously invisible, to observe the echoes that repeat differently each time. There is no finality, only continuity, only flow, only the silent movement of awareness within its own architecture. And so, as you close this chapter, pause for a moment. Breathe. Let the echoes settle. Let the corridors rest. Let the doors remain open or closed as they are meant to be. The room is endless, but you do not need to wander further tonight. Return to the awareness of presence. Return to the quiet of your own mind. Know that the endless room waits, that consciousness cycles, that perception loops, and that memory folds. You do not need to find anything beyond this. You do not need to seek. You do not need to escape. You only need to be here, in this moment, in this room, in this consciousness, infinite, silent, and ever returning. The journey ends not with a step outward, but with recognition inward. Everything you have seen, everything you have felt, every loop and echo, every shadow and reflection returns to its origin, you, or perhaps the room itself. And in that recognition, there is calm, there is stillness, there is presence. You are part of the room. The room is part of you. Endless, silent, infinite, returning, always returning.